If this question is answered, the answer is wrong. The Q&A paradox. The Q&A paradox is a question that turns reality inside out, a simple sentence that quietly cracks the logic holding our minds together. It asks, if this question is answered, is the answer wrong? At first glance, it feels like a riddle, but it's far more devastating than that. It's a psychological trapdoor that drops you into a place where truth becomes unstable. To even attempt an answer is to become tangled in contradiction. If you answer yes, then the answer is wrong, making your yes incorrect. If you answer no, you've still provided an answer, which by the question's design must also be wrong. Every path collapses under its own weight. This paradox destabilizes our relationship with knowledge and certainty. We are conditioned to believe that every question has an answer. That's how we function, how we solve problems, build science, navigate morality. But the Q&A paradox whispers something terrifying, that not every question is built to be solved. Some are designed to expose the limits of what the human mind can grasp, to reveal the illusion that logic is always a reliable guide. It pokes at our deepest intellectual insecurities, the fear that some truths, especially self-referential ones, lie forever out of reach. The emotional weight comes from its simplicity. It doesn't need complex math, paradoxical time travel, or metaphysical dilemmas. It's just a sentence, a question, one we desperately want to answer, but one that punishes us for trying. And in that moment, we are forced to sit with the unbearable truth. Some questions are designed not to be understood, but to remind us of the boundaries we pretend don't exist. The two envelopes problem. You're given two envelopes with money. One has twice as much as the other. Should you switch? At first glance, the two envelopes problem feels like a simple gamble, a game of chance with a 50-50 payoff. You're handed two sealed envelopes, A and B. One holds a certain amount of money, the other holds exactly twice that amount. You choose one. You peek inside. Let's say it has $100. Then comes the temptation. Should you switch? The mind stirs. If the one you picked has the smaller amount, switching gains you $100. But if it's the larger, switching only loses you $50. On average, you think the switch is worth it. But if that logic holds no matter which envelope you choose, shouldn't you always switch, even after switching, and then switch again? This is where the paradox unfolds its true cruelty. Your reasoning seems airtight, rational, even mathematical, but it leads to a loop of infinite doubt. Every time you calculate expected value, the math seduces you into thinking switching is always better. But if switching is always better, the entire premise must be flawed. Somewhere logic has turned against itself. You realize with creeping horror that your perfectly reasoned decision-making is rigged by a trap you can't locate. The numbers deceive you. This paradox isn't just about envelopes or cash. It's about the fragility of reason. It mocks our trust in logic, in intuition, in the way we assign value. It turns a harmless choice into a storm of confusion, seduction, and self-doubt. It forces you to question whether rational thinking, your strongest tool, is sometimes your most dangerous enemy. The Dr. Evil paradox. A perfect copy of you is made, down to your memories, fears, and fingerprints. Who is you now? The Dr. Evil paradox isn't just a thought experiment. It's an existential gut punch. Imagine waking up in a sterile room. A scientist informs you that an exact duplicate of you was created an hour ago. This copy thinks exactly like you, remembers your past, loves what you love, fears what you fear. Every scar, every secret, every spark of personality, you share it all. To your friends, your family, even to yourself in the mirror, you're indistinguishable. There is no glitch, no giveaway. You're not the original. Or are you? Then comes the crushing question. If everything that made you, you can be copied, were you ever real to begin with? If identity is just a pattern, a formula to be replicated, then consciousness is no longer sacred. It's a program. The soul, memory, the feeling of being uniquely me all suddenly look mechanical, replaceable, and terrifyingly fragile. Now, the paradox deepens. If the copy believes it is you and you believe you are you, can you both be right? If only one of you must die, who should it be? Which version has the rightful claim to your job, your family, your life? You suddenly see your identity hanging by a thread, not anchored in flesh or time, but in perspective alone. The Dr. Evil paradox doesn't just question who you are. It asks whether you have ever truly existed at all, or whether you've always been a story the brain tells itself to feel safe in a world where anyone, even you, can be replaced. The Grelling-Nelson paradox is the word heterological. Heterological? The Grelling-Nelson paradox is linguistic quicksand, harmless at first, then suffocating. It starts by dividing adjectives into two categories, autological and heterological. An autological word describes itself. Short is short. English is an English word. These are self-describing. A heterological word, on the other hand, does not describe itself. Long is not a long word. French is not a French word. Seems easy until you ask, is heterological a heterological word? If heterological is heterological, then it does not describe itself. But that's exactly what a heterological word is supposed to do, not describe itself. So if it doesn't describe itself, it does describe itself. And if it does describe itself, then it's not heterological, which means it doesn't describe itself again. The logic spirals into an infinite tailspin. You're trapped in a self-swallowing loop where meaning devours itself. And here's where it gets existentially haunting. Language is how we think. It's how we define truth, structure knowledge, assign identity. But this paradox takes language, our most trusted instrument, and shows that it can betray us. A single word, treated logically, can erupt into contradiction without warning. If a word can be undecidable about itself, what about us? What about identity, morality, or truth? The Grelling-Nelson paradox doesn't just break a sentence, it breaks confidence in the very structure of thought. It exposes that behind our perfectly arranged dictionaries and grammar rules lies a volatile chaos, a truth that sometimes, the closer we look for clarity, the more violently it slips away. The unexpected execution paradox. A prisoner is told he will be executed on a surprise day next week, but he won't know which day until it happens. At first, it sounds like a cruel joke wrapped in a riddle. The judge announces, "You will be executed next week, and it will be a surprise. You will not know the day until the executioner shows up." The prisoner begins to think, it can't be Friday, because if he's still alive Thursday night, Friday would no longer be a surprise, so Friday's out. Then Thursday can't be it either, because if Friday's impossible and he's alive on Wednesday night, Thursday wouldn't be a surprise either. By that logic, he eliminates every day of the week. Relieved, he thinks the execution will never happen. But on Wednesday, the executioner comes, and the prisoner is completely, terrifyingly surprised. This paradox is a psychological ambush, a place where logic leads to a false sense of safety and then brutally betrays you. The prisoner's reasoning is sound, it's clear, but reality doesn't care. The execution still comes, and the surprise is total. The very act of overthinking created the illusion of control, and that illusion became the trap. It's a paradox that attacks our belief in foresight. We crave predictability. We build logic to defend against fear, to keep the unknown at bay. But here, logic is the weapon used against us. The more the prisoner tried to outsmart fate, the more vulnerable he became. The lesson stings. Even perfect reasoning can lead to devastatingly wrong conclusions. And sometimes, the most unexpected thing in life is that it actually happens. The stone paradox. Can God create a stone so heavy that even he cannot lift it? The stone paradox is a silent scream buried in divine logic. It confronts omnipotence, the very idea of unlimited power, and cracks it in half. The question is hauntingly simple. Can an all-powerful God create a stone so heavy that even he cannot lift it? If he can, then there is something he cannot do. Lift the stone. If he cannot, then there is still something he cannot do. Create the stone. Either way, he is limited, caught, trapped in an impossible command. It shakes the foundations of faith, of logic, of what it means to be all-powerful. Omnipotence is supposed to be flawless, a perfect force beyond limitation. But this paradox poisons that image, revealing a flaw that no prayer or philosophical workaround can erase. It exposes the terrifying possibility that the very concept of unlimited power might be broken from the inside. And the emotional weight hits hard. If God, our ultimate symbol of strength and order, can be undone by a sentence, what hope do we have for certainty, for safety? We are beings who search for something greater, something invincible to believe in. But the stone paradox rips the curtain down and whispers, even the highest throne cannot escape logic's snare. It doesn't just question theology, it questions whether perfection is even possible, or if every ultimate, every absolute, eventually folds in on itself, not with thunder, but with the quiet cruelty of a contradiction too clever to ignore. The bootstrap paradox. A time traveler gives Beethoven his own sheet music, so who actually composed it? The bootstrap paradox is a quiet annihilation of origin, a loop so elegant and horrifying it erases causality itself. Imagine this: a time traveler idolizes Beethoven. They go back in time to meet him, only to find he never wrote the Fifth Symphony. Maybe he died young, or perhaps he simply never composed it. Horrified at the thought of losing such brilliance, the traveler hands him a copy of the symphony, sheet music taken from the future. Beethoven is amazed. He transcribes it, plays it, and becomes famous for it. Centuries later, the same sheet music ends up in the hands of another admirer, who brings it back to him again. No one ever composed it. The music exists in an eternal loop, passed from future to past and back again with no beginning. It's not Beethoven's creation, nor the traveler's. It simply exists. Suspended in the logic-breaking vacuum of time, the symphony has no origin and no creator. It was never written, and yet it's real. This paradox doesn't just play with time. It unravels our belief in cause and effect. It rips the thread that ties creation to creator, action to consequence. It dares you to ask, if something can exist without a source, what else in your world might be a copy of nothing? The bootstrap paradox feels like an existential lie masquerading as truth. It makes you wonder if your memories, your heroes, even your identity are artifacts of a loop you didn't start, stories no one ever wrote, but that somehow always were. Zeno's arrow. If time is composed of instants, how does an arrow ever move? Zeno's arrow is not just a paradox, it's a quiet dismantling of motion itself. Picture an arrow mid-flight, frozen in a single instant of time. In that instant, it occupies one precise position in space. It isn't moving forward or backward, it simply is. Now imagine every moment of its flight broken down into such still, indivisible instants. In each one, the arrow is motionless. So if time is just a series of these frozen slices, how does anything ever move? Your mind resists. You saw the arrow fly. You felt the wind of its passage. But Zeno cuts deeper than your senses. He cuts into the illusion of continuity. If at every moment the arrow is at rest, then what is motion but an illusion painted over stillness? Time, in this view, isn't a flow. It's a strobe light, blinking static frames that somehow feel fluid only because we are trapped inside them. And that's where the real emotional dissonance begins. We build our lives on movement, forward motion, progress, change. But if the arrow never truly moves, what about us? Are we walking through time, or are we just snapshots pretending to be a story? Does anything actually change, or are we just the illusion of change? Zeno's arrow doesn't just stop an arrow in midair, it stops your sense of certainty. It turns reality into a sequence of perfect still frames that mock your belief in motion, in time, in freedom. It whispers a quiet horror. Maybe everything is already still, and we're just too slow to notice. The Sleeping Beauty problem. Sleeping Beauty is put to sleep on Sunday. A fair coin is flipped. If it lands heads, she's awakened once on Monday. If it lands tails, she's awakened on both Monday and Tuesday, without memory of any previous waking. Each time she wakes, she doesn't know what day it is or how many times she's been woken. Upon waking, what should her belief be? Is the coin more likely heads or tails? This is the moment she opens her eyes, confused, isolated, erased. The room is quiet. The memories of yesterday, if it existed, are gone. She knows the setup. She knows how the experiment works. And now she must ask, what is the truth right now in this instant of awareness? Should she believe the coin landed heads with a 50% chance, or tails with 2 chances to wake and only 1 for heads? Most would say 50-50. That's what the coin said on Sunday. But others argue she should believe the chance of tails is 2/3, because in the world where tails happen, she wakes twice. In heads, only once. Statistically, it's more likely this waking moment came from a tails world. And here's where it begins to hurt. This isn't just about coins and sleep. It's about consciousness. It's about what it means to be here now and what probability even means when your memory and context are manipulated. It's about the terrifying possibility that your reality isn't shaped by external facts, but by how often you experience them. That you might trust your thoughts, your beliefs, your logic, only to discover they are skewed by the very fabric of your perception. Sleeping Beauty doesn't just ask what's true. She asks if we can ever really know what's real when our minds are trapped in loops we can't remember. The ship of Theseus. If every part of a ship is replaced, is it the same ship? The ship of Theseus is a paradox that doesn't just ask a question, it asks who you are. Imagine a ship, revered and remembered. Over time, its wooden planks rot and are replaced. One by one, every nail, every beam, every sail is swapped for something new, until not a single original piece remains. And then someone gathers all the old parts, reconstructs them into another ship. Now there are 2. So which one is the real ship of Theseus? On the surface, it's a riddle about identity and objects, but beneath that, it slices into something far more personal. You too are made of parts, cells that die and regenerate, memories that fade and rewrite themselves, beliefs that evolve. The person you were at age 5 doesn't exist anymore in any physical way, but aren't you still you? This paradox drills deep into the illusion of continuity. We crave permanence. We tell ourselves that identity is solid, rooted, reliable, but the ship of Theseus rips that comfort away. It shows us how fragile the concept of self really is, how it might just be a story we repeat to keep from falling apart. And then comes the haunting realization, if both ships claim the same origin and both are made from what once was, then maybe there is no true original, only versions, only echoes. What then anchors us to who we believe we are? When every part of you changes, what part is left that still gets to say, I am me? Bernardette's paradox. Imagine trying to walk down a road, but unknown to you, an infinite number of invisible barriers are lined up ahead, each one placed closer to the starting point than the last. You never touch one. You never see them. But you can't move. You never even take the first step. Bernardette's paradox is a slow suffocation of logic, a thought experiment where motion is stopped, not by impact, but by implication. The barriers don't need to act. Their very presence, their arrangement in infinite sequence, prevents motion altogether. If you try to take a step, The logic of their existence says you must hit the first one, but there is no first one. There's always another barrier before it. So you're trapped, not by force, but by the sheer weight of infinite prevention. It's not about the physical world. It's about how the idea of an infinite sequence can stop action before it begins. It tears at your intuition. You should be able to move. Nothing is stopping you, and yet you're immobilized by a wall of logic that doesn't even need to exist physically. It's the threat of consequences stacked infinitely ahead of you, none real on their own, but devastating in total. This paradox captures a deeper fear. What if your paralysis isn't caused by anything tangible, but by layers of imagined consequences, expectations, or barriers that never materialize? What if you're frozen not because something stopped you, but because infinity whispered, "Don't even try"? Bernardette's paradox isn't just about motion, it's about fear of the unknown multiplied by forever, and how sometimes the most powerful prisons are built entirely from the mind. The Fermi paradox. Where is everybody? The Fermi paradox is not just a scientific puzzle, it's a scream into the silence of the cosmos. With billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, and untold trillions of planets, the numbers whisper a haunting truth. We should not be alone. Statistically, life, intelligent life, should be everywhere. Civilization should be rising, expanding, sending signals, colonizing, colliding. The sky should be alive with voices, but it isn't. It's silent. It's too silent. So where is everybody? That's the paradox. We look out with radio telescopes, scan distant stars, launch probes, and listen. And what we hear is emptiness, deafening emptiness, not even a whisper. And that silence begins to rot the soul, because maybe the question isn't, where are they? Maybe the question is, why aren't we hearing them? The answers that follow are worse than the question. Maybe civilizations always destroy themselves before reaching the stars. Maybe there's something out there, something ancient, quiet, and watching, that ensures nothing grows loud enough to be noticed. Maybe intelligence itself is a cosmic mistake, a brief spark doomed to burn out before it spreads. And then, the darkest thought of all, maybe we are the first, or maybe we're already too late, alone, talking to ourselves across the cold dark, waiting for an answer that never comes. The Fermi paradox isn't terrifying because of what it says about aliens. It's terrifying because of what it says about us, that maybe our silence isn't an accident. Maybe it's a warning. The lottery paradox. You believe every single ticket in a million-ticket lottery will lose, and yet you also believe one will win. Both beliefs feel true, but they can't be. The lottery paradox is a soft-spoken contradiction that claws its way into the heart of rationality. Imagine holding a list of 1 million numbered tickets. You look at ticket number 1. Surely it won't win. Chances are nearly zero. You move on to number 2, same conclusion, or 3 or 4, all the way to 1,000. For each individual ticket, it is completely reasonable to believe that it will not be the winner, and so you do. You believe none of them will win, but then you take a step back, and the cruel twist comes into focus. You also believe that one ticket must win. That is the rule of the lottery. The system guarantees it. So now you hold two opposing truths. No ticket will win, and one ticket will win. You believe them both, completely, and that shatters something deep inside. This paradox isn't about gambling. It's about how human logic breaks down when scaled, how beliefs that are rational in isolation become irrational in combination. It's about the unbearable weight of certainty built on sand. The lottery paradox mirrors how we often live, dismissing possibilities one by one, convinced they won't happen, only to be stunned when one does. It questions how belief works. Can you trust your reasoning if your conclusions contradict when stacked? It asks a quietly terrifying question. How many things do you dismiss as unlikely individually sound, collectively doomed, and what vital truth might be lost in the crowd of your own assumptions. The mysterious stranger paradox, a being who causes all events while denying any existence. The mysterious stranger paradox is a quiet nightmare hiding inside the illusion of control. Imagine a figure, faceless, timeless, who moves through the world unseen. This being causes every twist of fate, every tragedy, every moment of joy or devastation, all without ever being noticed. You live your life believing in chance, free will, destiny, whatever helps you sleep. But behind it all, this stranger watches, shapes, orchestrates, and when confronted, it simply smiles and says, "I do not exist." The paradox grips the heart because it mirrors something disturbingly familiar. How much of our lives do we truly control? Are the choices we make really ours, or are we just reacting to invisible hands, subtle nudges we mistake for intuition? The mysterious stranger doesn't need to be real to haunt us. It's the embodiment of unseen influence, the idea that behind every decision lies a hidden cause we'll never understand. And the denial is the cruelest part. This being erases its own fingerprints. You search for meaning, for justice, for someone to blame or thank, and find only silence. And yet, things still happen. Pain still arrives. Miracles still unfold. The stranger moves through everything, yet insists it's never been there at all. This paradox forces you to question whether true randomness exists, or whether every second of your life has been manipulated by a force too elusive to confront. It doesn't seek worship. It doesn't crave belief. It only needs you to wonder, if something was controlling everything, how would you even know? The twin Earth paradox. Imagine there is a planet exactly like Earth in every way. Same people, same history, same language, same you. The only difference, what they call water, isn't H2O. It's a liquid with different chemical makeup. Call it XYZ. It looks the same, tastes the same, flows the same. To the inhabitants of Twin Earth, it's water. To you, it isn't. But here's the catch. Before scientists discovered the chemical structure of water, both Earth and Twin Earth used the word water the same way. So, what were they referring to? The twin Earth paradox is a dagger to the heart of meaning. It asks, what does a word really mean? What you think it refers to, or what it actually is? When you say water, are you referring to the wet, clear liquid you see, or to the molecule H2O? If your identical twin Earth self uses water to talk about XYZ, are you both right? Or is one of you forever mistaken without even knowing it? This paradox doesn't just crack open language, it exposes the fragility of knowledge. It says you can speak a word your entire life, use it perfectly, and still be wrong about what it means. It makes meaning terrifyingly external, tied not to thought or feeling, but to a chemical signature you might never see. It forces you to question your entire reality. How many things do you think you know simply because they feel familiar? What if your world is a perfect imitation and you'd never know? The twin Earth paradox quietly whispers, even your deepest truths might only be reflections, echoes from a place that looks exactly like home but isn't. The paradox of analysis. If an analysis is correct, it tells us nothing new. The paradox of analysis is a quiet killer of intellectual curiosity. It begins with a noble mission, to define, to explain, to make the unclear clear. You set out to analyze a concept. Say, a bachelor is an unmarried man. Seems precise, even obvious. But then comes the unsettling realization. If your analysis is correct, then it's nothing more than a restatement. You haven't discovered anything. You've just said the same thing in different words. And if it isn't obvious, if it teaches you something new, then it must be wrong, because it doesn't match the meaning you supposedly already knew. It's like chasing a ghost. Every time you try to break something down to its essence, you either say what's already known or say something different, which means you've lost the original. Truth slips through your fingers either way, and that's when the deeper fear creeps in. Maybe we can't explain things in the way we thought. Maybe all our knowledge is just circular, just definitions built on other definitions, and the moment we try to peel back the layers, we find there's no solid core, only echoes. The paradox of analysis isn't just about language or logic. It's about identity, meaning, understanding itself. It whispers that clarity might be an illusion, that every attempt to really explain something might be a trick we play on ourselves to feel in control, and in that moment, you begin to doubt whether anything, any idea, can truly be captured, pinned down, and known without losing what it was in the first place. Loeb's paradox. If P is provable, then P is provable, then P is provable. Loeb's paradox is a quiet implosion in the world of formal logic, a whispered riddle that breaks the spine of certainty. It begins with a statement about provability, not truth, not what is, but what can be shown. Suppose you have a proposition. Loeb's theorem says, if you can prove that if P is provable, then P must be provable, not because P is true, not because you've actually proved P, but because you've proved that the ability to prove P guarantees P itself. It sounds harmless, even logical, but then the trap tightens. What if P says something shocking, something dangerous? What if P is 0 equals 1? If you can somehow prove that if it's provable, then it's true, Loeb tells you that it must be provable, which means logic itself could collapse, eating its own rules in a self-fulfilling cycle. This paradox is the ghost that haunts the foundation of mathematics. It lives in the shadows cast by Gödel's incompleteness theorems, where truth and proof drift apart like broken tectonic plates. It whispers that our entire system of reasoning is held together by assumptions we dare not question too hard, that the more we try to seal the cracks, the more we risk tearing everything open. Loeb's paradox isn't about proving something. It's about how the very act of believing in provability can summon a truth into existence, not because it's real, but because the system says so. And once logic can birth truth from that kind of loop, can we trust it at all? Quine's paradox, a sentence that refers to itself in a non-obvious way. Quine's paradox is a trapdoor hidden in the fabric of language, one that doesn't look like a paradox at all until it's too late. Imagine reading the sentence, yields falsehood when preceded by its quotation, yields falsehood when preceded by its quotation. You pause. It feels strange, recursive, maybe even broken, but the moment you try to unpack it, the floor beneath your understanding vanishes. This sentence doesn't shout, I am lying. It doesn't loop itself obviously. Instead, it quietly builds a structure of reference where the sentence and the act of quoting the sentence become one twisted whole. It doesn't directly refer to itself. It does it sideways, indirectly, like a mirror reflecting another mirror, and suddenly you are in the reflection. And the horror isn't in its cleverness, it's in what it reveals, that language can lie without ever breaking a rule, that a sentence can seem grammatically sound, even logical, while devouring itself from the inside. You read it once, then again, and each time it makes less sense, not more. You thought words were tools of clarity, but Quine shows they can be weapons of confusion. This paradox is a quiet rebellion against everything we believe about meaning. It strips away the illusion that communication is clean, that logic is immune to collapse. It shows that some truths implode the moment we try to express them, and in that moment, you're left staring at a sentence that is both the key and the lock, the message and the madness, proof that even language can go insane. The Sorites paradox. If you remove one grain of sand from a heap, it's still a heap. Remove another, it's still a heap. But if you keep removing grains one by one, when does it stop being a heap? The Sorites paradox is the slow death of meaning through 1,000 tiny cuts. It starts with something harmless, an innocent pile of sand. You take away a single grain. Of course, it's still a heap. Do it again. Still a heap. But repeat this logic enough times, and the heap vanishes. Yet at no exact point did it ever stop being a heap. There's no moment you can point to and say, there, that's when it died. It just fades, slowly, invisibly, until it's nothing. This paradox tears at the edges of language, forcing you to confront how fragile your definitions really are. It reveals that the words we rely on, heap, bald, tall, rich, poor, aren't grounded in precision, but in collective illusion. We believe there are boundaries, that there's a line between enough and not enough. But the Sorites paradox shows that line is smoke. It doesn't exist, or if it does, it exists in a place so uncertain it can't be named. It stings because it mimics real life. When does love fade? When does youth end? When does someone go from kind to cruel, from sane to broken, from you to someone else entirely? The Sorites paradox isn't just about sand, it's about erosion, of meaning, of identity, of everything we try to define but never truly can. And it asks, with unbearable quiet, when did it all start to disappear, and why didn't you notice? The omnipotence paradox. Can an all-powerful being limit its own power? The omnipotence paradox is a beautiful, brutal riddle, one that aims its blade at the heart of divinity itself. It asks, if a being is truly all-powerful, can it create a task it cannot accomplish? Can it build a prison so strong it cannot escape, or a limit so absolute it cannot cross? If the answer is yes, then there is something it cannot do, overcome that limit. And if the answer is no, there's still something it cannot do, create the limit. Either way, omnipotence collapses in on itself. It's a contradiction so sharp it slices through comfort. We want to believe in something infinite, unbreakable, beyond failure. But the paradox forces us to face a chilling idea that even the concept of all-powerful might be broken at its core. That ultimate power, when pushed to its logical extreme, becomes self-defeating. This isn't just a theological brain teaser. It bleeds into the very idea of perfection. We associate limitlessness with freedom, with control, with salvation. But the omnipotence paradox whispers that true perfection may be impossible because it carries within it the seed of its own undoing. And it's personal too, because if even a God can't have it all, if even infinity breaks under contradiction, then what hope do we have for clarity, for answers, for something to lean on that won't vanish when we think too hard? The paradox doesn't kill faith. It does something more devastating. It turns faith into a question that never stops asking itself. What does it really mean to be powerful, if power itself has a limit written in its own definition? The unexpected hanging. A judge tells a prisoner he will be hanged next week, but the day will be a surprise. He won't know the day until the moment the noose tightens. The prisoner, sharp and logical, begins to think. It can't be Friday, he reasons. If I'm still alive Thursday night, the only day left is Friday, and I'd expect it. That's not a surprise. So Friday is ruled out, but then Thursday can't be the day either, because now Friday is off the table, and if he's still alive Wednesday night, Thursday becomes the last possible day. Again, not a surprise. He continues this backward logic until he's eliminated the entire week. The hanging, he concludes, cannot happen at all. He sleeps soundly until Wednesday morning. The guards come, the rope waits, and he is completely, utterly stunned. This paradox is a psychological ambush that shatters our faith in logic's protective walls. The prisoner's reasoning was flawless. Each step made perfect sense, but the surprise still came. The logic didn't prevent the outcome. It blinded him to it. His trust in deduction led him straight into the trap. And this is where the paradox wounds us, because we are all that prisoner, in one way or another. We try to reason our way out of uncertainty, to solve life like a puzzle we can conquer. We think if we can just predict enough, prepare enough, we'll never be caught off guard. But sometimes life doesn't follow logic. Sometimes it slips through the cracks and strikes precisely because we were certain it wouldn't. The unexpected hanging isn't just about a prisoner. It's about how even perfect reasoning can't save us from the unpredictable cruelty of fate. Hilbert's Hotel. A hotel with infinite rooms can always take more guests. Hilbert's Hotel is a thought experiment that feels like a nightmare dressed in logic. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, and every single one of them is occupied. You arrive hoping to check in. Normally, you'd be turned away, but not here. In Hilbert's Hotel, the manager simply asks each guest to move from room N to room N+1. Now room 1 is free for you. Problem solved. It gets worse. What if an infinite number of new guests arrive? No problem. Each current guest moves to room 2N. Suddenly, all odd-numbered rooms are free. Infinite space, infinite guests. No one turned away. And this is where the terror begins, not because of what it says about hotels, but because of what it says about reality. In our world, full means full, limit means limit. But Hilbert's Hotel burns that rule to ash. It reveals that infinity isn't just a big number. It's a completely different kind of existence, one that laughs at logic, mocks intuition, and obeys rules we can't emotionally grasp. You begin to feel it, the discomfort, the truth that our minds were never built to handle infinity. It's too slippery, too bottomless. In Hilbert's Hotel, you never run out of space, yet you're always trapped inside a system that never ends, never rests, never fills. You thought you understood limits. You thought you knew what it meant for something to be complete. But Hilbert's Hotel shows you a world where complete means endlessly rearranged. And the more you try to make sense of it, the more you realize infinity doesn't play by our rules. It rewrites them. The liar paradox. This statement is false. It's just 5 words, short, clean, and brutally impossible. The liar paradox is a sentence that folds in on itself like a trap door, where truth and falsehood chase each other in an endless loop, each canceling the other out the moment you think you've understood it. If the statement is true, then what it says must be the case, which means it's false. But if it's false, then it's not telling the truth, which means it must be true. And just like that, logic eats its own tail. This paradox doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't break the rules of logic with force, it breaks them from within. And that's what makes it so terrifying, because it exposes something we don't like to admit, that truth itself can become unstable, that the very foundation of communication, of knowing anything, can fracture under its own weight. It's not just a clever sentence, it's a mirror held up to the fragility of certainty. It forces you to confront the horrifying idea that some truths can't be known, that some systems are built to fail the moment they try to fully understand themselves, that the very act of speaking something simple can unravel into something unspeakable. The liar paradox doesn't just twist language, it pulls the floor out from under thought itself, and in the quiet space that follows, you're left wondering if even the simplest sentence can be both true and false. What else in your world is built on a contradiction you've never seen? Russell's paradox. The set of all sets that do not contain themselves. Russell's paradox is not just a logical contradiction. It's a ticking bomb that once sat quietly at the center of mathematics. It begins innocently enough. Imagine a library of sets. Some sets contain themselves, like the set of all abstract ideas, which includes itself. Others don't, like the set of all apples, which clearly doesn't include itself as an apple. Now ask, what about the set of all sets that do not contain themselves? If it contains itself, then by definition it shouldn't, because it only holds sets that do not contain themselves. But if it doesn't contain itself, then it should, because it qualifies as a set that does not contain itself. The logic turns cannibalistic. It devours itself in a loop that cannot be untied. And it gets worse. This wasn't some quirky brain teaser scribbled on a napkin. It shattered the foundation of early set theory, the bedrock of mathematics. If you can't even define a set without tearing reality apart, what else breaks? Numbers? Logic? Truth? Emotionally, it lands like a betrayal. Math is supposed to be pure, untouchable, eternal. But Russell's paradox shows that even the most sacred ideas can implode. It's a haunting reminder that our systems, no matter how elegant, can collapse under the weight of a single well-aimed question. And in that collapse, you see something terrifying. The truth is not always safe. Sometimes it's a trap. Sometimes simply asking the wrong question opens a door to a place where reason has no power and nothing, not even logic, can escape untouched. The Skolem paradox. Set theory tells us some infinities are uncountable, too large to be listed one by one. Yet Skolem's paradox shows that within formal logic, we can build a model of this very theory, where everything is countable. This is not a math error, it's a crack in the universe. Imagine a world built from the rules of set theory. In that world, the theory declares the existence of uncountable sets, collections too vast to be listed, like the real numbers. But here's the twist. Gödel's completeness theorem says that if these rules are consistent, there must exist a model, a logical universe, where all of it is true. And Skolem showed that such a model can be countable. That's right, a mathematical universe that believes it contains uncountable sets, even though from outside we can list everything in it. The horror begins when you realize what this means. From inside the model, there are uncountable things, but from outside, the model itself is just a list. Nothing uncountable, everything innumerable. It's like a mind convinced it's infinite, living inside a bottle it can never see, where someone else can count all its thoughts. Skolem's paradox is a quiet existential crisis wrapped in mathematical rigor. It shows that meaning can shift depending on where you're standing, that what seems infinite and vast from within might be just a finite trick from above. It forces you to question what truth even means in a formal system, if the universe can lie to itself and not even know. And then it asks, how sure are you that your world isn't just a countable illusion of something greater? Banach-Tarski paradox. You can split a sphere into parts and reassemble two identical ones. The Banach-Tarski paradox is a mathematical hallucination, a theorem so violently absurd it shatters your sense of physical reality. Imagine holding a perfect solid sphere in your hands. Using only 5 cuts, you break it into pieces, not crushed or melted, but cleanly divided using pure geometry. Then, without stretching or adding anything, you rearrange those pieces and end up with 2 identical spheres, each the exact same size as the original. No tricks, no illusions, just math. You didn't shrink the pieces, you didn't duplicate them, you simply moved them, obeying the rules of logic and set theory. And yet, somehow, you've created something from nothing. This isn't just counterintuitive, it's blasphemy against everything you thought reality was. It tells you that volume, space, and matter, concepts we trust with our lives, can be betrayed by the very math that defines them. It shows that under the surface of the world is a system so alien that when fully obeyed, it creates miracles too disturbing to believe. And the horror deepens when you realize this isn't science fiction. It's proven. The only reason you can't actually perform it is because it requires pieces so infinitely jagged and scattered, so non-measurable that they cannot exist in the physical world. But in the realm of pure mathematics, they're real. They obey the rules. The Banach-Tarski paradox forces you to confront a devastating truth. That logic, in its most perfect form, can destroy the very fabric of common sense. that from the right angle, even reality can be split and doubled with nothing but thought. Newcomb's paradox, a powerful predictor, virtually infallible, offers you a choice. There are two boxes. Box A is transparent and contains $1,000. Box B is opaque and may contain either $1 million or nothing. You have two options. Take only box B or take both A and B. But here's the twist. The predictor has already made its decision. If it predicted you'd take both boxes, it left box B empty. If it predicted you'd take only box B, it placed 1 million inside. You stand before the boxes, knowing this. The choice is yours, but the decision has already been made. Newcomb's paradox is a slow-burn psychological war between logic and intuition. One voice whispers, "Take both." The predictor's already made its move. You can't change the past. If box B has 1 million, you'll get 1 million plus 1,000. But another voice screams, "You're predictable." The predictor knew what you'd do. If you take both, you get less. If you take only B, you win big. Your choice isn't a reaction. It's the final piece of the puzzle the predictor already saw. And suddenly, your free will feels poisoned. This paradox splits your sense of agency down the middle. Do you act like the future is fixed or like your decision still matters? Do you trust your rational self or your belief in a deterministic universe so tightly wired that it reads you like a book? Newcomb's paradox isn't just about money. It's about the terrifying possibility that your choices are nothing more than echoes, decisions already made, illusions you call freedom. And the moment you open your hand toward either box, you're not deciding. You're playing a part you were always meant to play. Goodman's GREW paradox. Things can be GREW, green until 2050, blue after. Goodman's GREW paradox is not a riddle about color. It's a direct assault on how we trust what we know. Imagine a new word, GREW. Something is GREW if it is green up until the year 2050 and blue afterward. Now, suppose you've observed emerald after emerald, all glowing green. It seems safe, logical, to conclude that all emeralds are green. But here's the twist. Every emerald you've seen is also GREW. They've all been green so far, and it's not yet 2050. So why assume they'll stay green instead of turning blue? The trap is subtle but devastating. Two patterns, green and GREW, are equally supported by the same evidence, but they predict radically different futures. Your reasoning process built on trust in past observations is suddenly worthless. You realize your predictions don't depend on nature. They depend on the language you use to describe it. And that's when the panic sets in, because it means your beliefs about the world might not be grounded in truth, but in habits, labels, traditions. You think you know what to expect tomorrow, but what if your entire framework for knowing is just a linguistic illusion? Goodman's GREW paradox poisons the roots of induction, our ability to learn from the past. It whispers that the future might not follow the patterns we believe in, that every scientific theory, every expectation might just be a convenient guess, framed in words that feel right. And as 2050 approaches, you're left with one burning, terrifying question. What if everything we think we know is only true until it isn't? The Raven paradox. You want to test the statement, all ravens are black. One day you see a green apple, and by the strange logic of confirmation, that green apple supports your claim. The Raven paradox is a quiet betrayal of intuition, a logical trap disguised as a simple observation. You start with the rule, all ravens are black. That's logically equivalent to, if something is not black, then it is not a raven. So when you see a green apple, something not black and not a raven, you found an example that fits this rule. In doing so, you've just confirmed that all ravens are black. But your mind recoils. How can a green apple, utterly unrelated to ravens, offer any meaningful evidence about the color of birds? You want to laugh it off, but the logic won't let go. If you accept that evidence works through logical equivalence, then every non-black, non-raven counts. Every blue sock, every white wall, every yellow taxi, all quietly whispering, yes, ravens are still black. And this is where the paradox begins to suffocate, because now you're forced to choose between your gut and your logic, between the way the world feels and the way it works. You start to see how fragile confirmation really is, how easily evidence can be twisted by the rules of logic until meaning becomes absurd. The raven paradox isn't just about birds, it's about how we gather truth, how what we believe is supported not by what makes sense, but by what fits a system we barely understand. And it leaves you haunted by a single quiet question. What if everything you thought confirmed your beliefs never really did? Moore's paradox. It's raining, but I don't believe it is. Moore's paradox is a blade that cuts through the soul of consciousness itself. At first glance, the sentence, "It's raining, but I don't believe it is," seems grammatically correct, even factual, but something in your gut recoils. Something feels broken. If you truly believe it's not raining, how can you also truthfully say that it is? And if it is raining, how can you sincerely claim not to believe it? This paradox doesn't live in the world. It lives inside your mind. It exposes a jagged fault line between truth and belief, between what is real and what you accept as real. You can imagine someone saying it, maybe as a joke, maybe in confusion, but the second they do, the sentence collapses under the weight of its own contradiction. It's not a lie. It's not even nonsense. It's something worse, a statement that feels impossible, yet somehow isn't. And then the deeper discomfort sets in. How many times in your life have you acted out Moore's paradox without even realizing it? Saying one thing, believing another, knowing the truth, but emotionally rejecting it. Feeling safe while fearing disaster, loving someone, yet believing they don't love you back. This paradox strips away the illusion that belief and reality naturally align. It shows us that we are creatures of chaos, capable of living in contradiction and not even noticing. And once you see that gap between what is and what we believe is, you can't unsee it. You realize how fragile your sense of truth really is, and it haunts you. The barber paradox. In a village, there is a barber. He shaves all and only those men in the village who do not shave themselves. The question is simple. Who shaves the barber? It seems harmless, almost playful. But the moment you try to answer, the logic snarls. If the barber shaves himself, then by definition, he must not shave himself. But if he doesn't shave himself, then according to the rule, he must shave himself. Both options loop back into each other like a snake swallowing its tail. You're trapped. There's no escape. The paradox doesn't just confuse, it erases the possibility of a solution altogether. The horror lies in its simplicity. It's not a paradox buried in equations or time travel. It's a sentence, a rule, a role, and it explodes the foundation of self-reference, how a rule behaves when it turns inward. The barber's role collapses the moment it includes himself, and in that collapse, logic reveals its fragility. This paradox echoes through everything self-contained. Legal systems that try to judge themselves, belief systems that claim absolute objectivity, even minds that try to fully understand themselves. It's the ache of recursion, the pain of circular definition. It's the realization that some systems cannot include themselves without falling apart. The barber paradox doesn't just ask who shaves the barber, it asks who watches the watcher, who judges the judge, who defines the definer. And sometimes the only honest answer is silence, because the question doesn't fail by accident. It was made to break the system from the inside, and it does, effortlessly. The absent-minded driver, you forget which exit is best at every intersection. The absent-minded driver paradox feels like a bad dream you can't wake up from. You're driving down a highway toward home. There are multiple exits. You know one of them leads to your destination, one to a costly detour, and one back to where you started. You've planned your route perfectly in advance, but here's the twist. You're absent-minded. At each exit, you forget where you are. You can't tell if it's the first, second, or third. You see a turnoff and must decide, do I take it or keep driving? What begins as a logistical challenge quickly mutates into existential paralysis. The moment you begin to think rationally, that rationality collapses under uncertainty. You have no memory of how many exits have passed. You only know the odds. You try to calculate, to optimize, to be clever, but every calculation must begin with where am I? And that's the one answer you'll never have. And here's where the emotional weight crashes in. You're not just lost. You're lost in a system you designed. You made the plan. You knew the stakes, but your own mind has become your enemy. Every choice feels like a gamble between progress and failure, between salvation and looping endlessly back to the beginning. This paradox doesn't just haunt philosophers, it mirrors life. How often do we plan for the future only to forget the path once we're on it? How often do we make decisions in fog, hoping we're at the right place, knowing we'll never truly be sure? The absent-minded driver isn't just about exits, it's about what happens when awareness itself breaks down, when you're behind the wheel but no longer know where you are or who's really driving. Hempel's paradox. You're trying to confirm the statement, all ravens are black. You see a black raven, great, that helps. But then you see a white shoe, and according to logic, that also confirms all ravens are black. Hempel's paradox is a soft explosion hidden in plain sight. It begins with a rule. All ravens are black is logically equivalent to all non-black things are non-ravens. That means every time you see something that isn't black, say a red apple, a yellow bus, a white shoe, and it's also not a raven, you've confirmed the rule. These objects silently whisper, see, still true. But that makes no emotional sense. How can something as unrelated as a tennis ball possibly help prove something about ravens? The paradox tightens around your throat the more you accept it, because logic insists it's right. If you're testing a universal claim, then everything that fits its equivalent supports it. But your intuition rebels. Seeing a million non-black, non-raven things tells you nothing about the nature of ravens. It's like trying to prove every snowflake is unique by counting grains of sand. This paradox doesn't just shake your understanding of evidence, it quietly poisons it. It reveals how our tools for finding truth, observation, confirmation, pattern, can betray us when stretched. That under strict logic, absurdity sometimes counts as support. And once you see that, you start to wonder what else you've accepted as evidence that never really was. Hempel's paradox isn't about ravens, it's about trust. What we believe counts as truth, and what happens when the very process of confirming something leaves you more uncertain than before. The crocodile paradox. A crocodile who steals a child promises to return it only if you guess correctly. The crocodile paradox is a riddle dressed as a nightmare, a sick game of logic with the highest possible stakes. A crocodile snatches a child from a riverbank and turns to the grieving parent with a twisted offer. I will return your child only if you guess correctly what I am going to do next. The parent, trembling, says, "You're going to keep my child." Now everything collapses. If the crocodile was going to return the child, then the guess is wrong. So he keeps the child, making the guess right, which means he should have returned the child. But if the crocodile wasn't going to return the child, then the guess is correct. So he must return the child, making the guess wrong again. Every path contradicts itself. The moment logic steps in, morality is paralyzed. It's not just a paradox, it's a horror story wearing a philosopher's robe, because here, reason doesn't save you. It ensures your suffering. You're forced to watch as truth becomes a trap and words become weapons. you realize that this isn't about crocodiles or guesses. It's about what happens when ethics and logic collide and no outcome feels just. The crocodile paradox shatters the illusion that truth always leads to fairness, that reason will rescue us. Sometimes being right changes nothing. Sometimes being clever seals your fate. And sometimes the ones who hold the power write rules so twisted that the more you understand them, the more hopeless you become. The hypergame paradox. Imagine a game called hypergame. The rules are simple. Choose any game that is not self-referential and play it. That's it. Hypergame is a metagame, a game of games. But here's the twist. What happens when you try to play hypergame itself? At first, it feels clever, elegant even. Hypergame simply avoids the paradoxes of self-reference by refusing to include any game that refers to itself. It's the safe zone, the guarded gate. But then you realize something chilling. Hypergame is a game. So, can it choose itself? If it can, it breaks its own rule. It becomes self-referential. If it can't, then there's a game, hypergame, that's not self-referential, which it refuses to play, meaning it should be able to choose it. The moment you ask hypergame to include itself, logic collapses. The safe zone turns inside out. The loop begins. This paradox isn't just a glitch, it's a trap. It seduces you with order, only to crush you with recursion. It shows how systems meant to exclude paradox end up becoming one. It's the haunting realization that even frameworks designed to protect you from contradiction are vulnerable to the very thing they reject. Hypergame is more than a game. It's a mirror held up to language, reason, and every attempt we make to define a reality that cannot define itself. It's the whisper that warns. No matter how carefully you build the rules, the moment you try to include the rule book inside the game breaks you. Not with violence, but with a quiet, perfect contradiction you can never outrun. Self-reference paradox. This sentence refers to itself. The self-reference paradox is the philosophical equivalent of staring into a mirror and seeing not your reflection, but a door to nowhere. This sentence refers to itself. It sounds harmless, almost boring, but say it aloud and you feel it. It loops, it folds, it traps you. The sentence doesn't describe anything outside itself. It is its own subject, its own object. It is talking about itself while being the thing it's talking about. You expect language to point somewhere, to describe, explain, reveal, but this sentence is a snake eating its own tail. It doesn't inform, it doesn't lie, it doesn't even try to deceive. It simply exists to reference itself, and in doing so, it bends your mind inward. You try to analyze it, to find the deeper meaning, but there's no exit, no aboutness to follow. It doesn't tell you anything, yet you can't dismiss it. The structure is sound, the grammar correct. It exists perfectly and says nothing except, I exist. And here's the deeper terror. It reflects us. We too often define ourselves in loops. I am who I am. This is just how I think. Identity, belief, even consciousness itself. We circle around ideas that feed into themselves. Who are you, if not the story you repeat? The self-reference paradox isn't broken language. It's language exposing its own shadow. It whispers that not all meaning reaches outward. Some meaning only turns back in, trapping you in a thought that endlessly reflects itself until you can't tell the mirror from the mind staring into it. Jourdain's card paradox. You're holding a simple card. On one side, it reads, "The sentence on the other side of this card is true." You flip it over. The other side says, "The sentence on the other side of this card is false." And in that instant, meaning dies. This is Jourdain's card paradox. Two sentences chasing each other in a loop of annihilation. If the first sentence is true, then the second one must be true because it says the first one is false. But that makes the first sentence false. If the first is false, then the second must be false, which means the first is true. Around and around they go, ripping each other apart in a perfect contradiction. Unlike the classic liar paradox, this isn't just one sentence turning on itself, it's two, each trying to stand by, leaning on the other, collapsing the moment you remove either. It feels like a puzzle, but it's not something you solve, it's something you survive. Because it's not just about cards or clever wording, it's a crack in logic itself, a place where reference, this sacred bridge between words and truth, fails spectacularly. It leaves you staring at two sentences that mean everything and nothing at once. And the worst part? You're holding it, you're flipping it, you're the observer, and the paradox only exists because you looked. Jourdain's card doesn't just question the truth, it turns you into the battlefield where truth devours itself. And once you've seen the loop, you can't unsee it. You're stuck in the flip, forever. Teletransportation paradox. If you're disassembled and reassembled, are you still you? The teletransportation paradox doesn't just ask a question, it holds a knife to your identity. Imagine stepping into a sleek, futuristic booth. It scans every atom in your body, destroys the original, and beams the data across the world, or to Mars. There, an exact copy of you is built from new material. Every memory, every scar, every flicker of your personality is replicated perfectly. The new you opens their eyes and continues living your life as if nothing happened. But here's the question that stabs deeper than science fiction ever dares to. Did you survive, or were you just killed and replaced by a perfect stranger? The horror lies in the subtlety. No pain, no violence, just disappearance. And worse, continuation. The new person laughs your laugh, loves your family, remembers your childhood, but your body is gone. Your consciousness, whatever that truly means, was shattered and rebuilt. Is that survival or elegant annihilation? Now the ground beneath your feet begins to dissolve, because if this counts as you, then what are you really? A pattern, a code, a fragile illusion carried by atoms that don't care who you are? And if it's not you, then how do you ever know you survived anything? Sleep, anesthesia, trauma. The teletransportation paradox presses its cold finger to your forehead and whispers, if a copy of you wakes up tomorrow, indistinguishable from who you were today, would it matter if you died in the process? And the more you think about it, the more that terrifying answer begins to feel like yes. The no cloning paradox. In the quantum world, there is a sacred rule. You cannot perfectly copy an unknown quantum state. No matter how advanced your tools, no matter how precise your machines, quantum mechanics says there is no way to clone the full essence of a quantum particle without disturbing it. And yet, quantum teleportation is real. We've done it. So how can you send something you can't copy? This is the no cloning paradox, a quiet, unnerving contradiction at the edge of reality. On one hand, the no cloning theorem is absolute. If you could clone quantum states, you'd break the fabric of physics. You could violate Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, copy entangled particles, transmit information faster than light. It would shatter causality, and time itself might unravel. That's how sacred this limit is. But then comes quantum teleportation, a real, experimentally confirmed process where an exact quantum state is transferred from one particle to another across space. The original is destroyed and the copy appears elsewhere. It's not duplication, it's displacement. But emotionally, it feels like cloning. It feels like magic, and it forces a terrifying question. If we can move quantum identity without copying it, what is identity really? This paradox doesn't just challenge physics, it shreds our notion of self. If you teleport your consciousness by destroying it here and rebuilding it there, did you survive? Or did something that looks and thinks like you simply take your place? The no cloning paradox whispers that you are not permanent, not even to the universe, that what you are may not be something that can be saved, only moved or lost. The trolley problem. Should you divert a train to kill one person instead of five? The trolley problem is not a puzzle. It's a moral earthquake disguised as a question. A runaway train speeds down the tracks. Ahead, 5 people are tied up and helpless. You stand beside a lever, pull it, and the train diverts onto another track, where 1 person is tied up instead. Do nothing and 5 die. Pull it, and 1 dies by your hand. You are not innocent either way. At first, logic whispers, save the most lives. But then the weight settles in, because pulling that lever doesn't feel like math. It feels like murder. You didn't tie them up. You didn't set this in motion. Yet now the universe demands that you choose who dies. Do you become the agent of death to save more lives? Or do you stand by, letting fate do the killing? Because at least your hands stay clean. It shatters the illusion that morality is simple, that right and wrong are obvious. It forces you to confront the dark truth that sometimes ethics means choosing the harm you can live with, not avoiding pain, but picking whose pain it will be. And it only gets worse when you realize this isn't theoretical. Every day, in politics, in medicine, in war, leaders pull levers. They choose who gets resources, who gets protection, who gets left behind. And the terrifying part? They sleep at night. The trolley problem doesn't offer a solution. It holds a mirror to your soul and asks, how much death can you live with if it means you saved someone else? The mereological paradox. You pick up a single brick from a crumbling wall. It's just one piece, but does it still belong to the wall? If you remove half the bricks, is it still the wall? If you remove all of them, brick by brick, when does the wall stop being the wall? And what exactly is the wall? The mereological paradox is a slow, agonizing unraveling of identity through parts and wholes. It asks a question so simple it almost feels like a trick. Can something exist independently from the thing it came from and still be itself? Does the wheel still count as part of the car in your garage? Are you still you if every cell in your body has been replaced, one by one over time? This paradox claws at the illusion of permanence. It shows that what we call a thing might just be an arrangement, an agreement, that there may be no true whole, only parts we mentally glue together and call complete. But that glue, it's not logic, it's emotion, it's memory, it's our fear of letting things dissolve. It's the fear that if we admit parts are all there is, then maybe we too are just parts. That the mind, the soul, the self aren't singular or sacred, but merely configurations, temporary harmonies of fleeting components. The mereological paradox doesn't just ask, what is the whole? It quietly terrifies you with a deeper question. Was there ever one at all? Or have we been naming ghosts just to keep ourselves from falling apart? Protagoras paradox. A student will pay his teacher only if he wins the first case. The Protagoras paradox is a legal trap woven so tightly it chokes justice itself. Protagoras, a famed sophist, agrees to teach a student law on one condition. The student will pay him only after he wins his first court case. But after finishing his studies, the student refuses to practice law at all. Protagoras, impatient and unpaid, sues the student to force him into court, and here the paradox begins to twist. Protagoras argues, if I win this case, the student must pay me by court order. If I lose, the student has won his first case, and by our agreement must pay me. Either way, I win. But the student counters, if I lose, I owe nothing, because I haven't won a case yet. And if I win, the court says I don't have to pay you. Either way, I don't owe you a cent. Now the courtroom becomes a stage for contradiction. Every possible verdict creates a conflict with the agreement. Justice loops back on itself, like a snake devouring its tail. No matter who wins, the logic insists both sides are right and both are wrong. It's more than a clever riddle. It's a warning that contracts, laws, and even promises built on reason can collapse when that reason folds in on itself. That truth can't always be enforced. And the deeper terror is this: in trying to force fairness, Protagoras created a world where fairness became impossible, a world where every outcome guarantees injustice, because every path proves itself to be the wrong one. Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles, the fastest man alive, gives a tortoise a head start in a race. Confident, he begins to run, but by the time Achilles reaches the tortoise's starting point, the tortoise has moved a little farther ahead. Achilles speeds up, but again, by the time he reaches that next point, the tortoise has moved slightly more, and again, the gap shrinks, but it never disappears. According to this logic, Achilles can never overtake the tortoise. Zeno's paradox isn't a race. It's a trap disguised as one. It stretches time into an infinite chain of tiny steps, each smaller than the last, until motion itself seems impossible. How can someone ever arrive if there's always one more fraction of space left to cross? How can anything truly happen if reality is made of infinities we never reach? This paradox doesn't just mock speed, it mocks progress, change, the very flow of time. It turns motion into an illusion, replacing action with an endless checklist of unreachable milestones. And it's haunting because it feels true. Your mind tries to fight it, to say obviously Achilles wins, but the logic hums like a quiet threat in the background. If the world can be broken into infinite pieces, how do we ever get from one to the next? Achilles and the tortoise isn't about who wins the race. It's about whether movement, change, growth, even healing is real at all, or whether every step you think you've taken is still waiting to be finished in a sequence that never ends. Paradox of inquiry, Meno's paradox. How can you search for what you don't know? Meno's paradox is a slow-burning explosion in the mind, one that shatters your faith in learning itself. The question is deceptively simple. How can you search for something when you don't know what it is? If you already know it, there's no need to search. But if you don't know it at all, not its shape, its scent, its form, how will you even recognize it when you find it? How can you chase something nameless in a world that demands labels? This paradox doesn't just question knowledge, it questions discovery. It poisons the spark of curiosity, whispering that every question is either pointless or impossible. Either you already know the answer, or you'll never know when you've reached it. It traps you in a prison where learning seems both unnecessary and unreachable. And then comes the emotional collapse. Because learning is how we grow, it's how we escape ignorance, pain, confusion. But Meno forces you to face a brutal truth that perhaps the mind isn't built to find truth, but to hallucinate it, that our answers might just be guesses that happen to stick, and every great discovery, every moment of clarity, might be nothing more than a lucky stumble in the dark. Meno's paradox isn't an abstract thought experiment. It's the voice that rises when you doubt your purpose, your direction, your search for meaning. It asks, what if every step you take toward truth is just a circle? What if you're chasing something you'll never even recognize when it stands right in front of you? The beard paradox. You see a clean-shaven man. Clearly he has no beard. Now imagine he doesn't shave for a day. Still no beard. Another day, just stubble. Still not a beard. Add one more hair, and another, and another. When exactly does he become bearded? Is there a precise moment when the label beard suddenly applies? The beard paradox is deceptively innocent, a slow erosion of clarity hidden in something as mundane as facial hair. It asks, how many hairs make a beard? If one hair isn't a beard, and adding just one hair can't transform a non-beard into a beard, then no amount of hair should ever make a beard. And yet, clearly, they do. This is where language quietly betrays us. Words we use every day, tall, old, rich, bald, kind, begin to blur under scrutiny. They seem solid, but when you look closely, they dissolve into fog. There's no line, no moment. just a slow slide from one thing into another until you're forced to realize that many of our categories are illusions held together by assumption and habit. And here's where it hits hard. If there's no clear moment when someone becomes bearded, then when do you become good, successful, broken, enough? The beard paradox exposes the aching truth that many of the identities we cling to, our labels, our transitions, our growth, may have no sharp boundary. And if there's no single moment that defines you, then maybe you are always becoming, or maybe, terrifyingly, never quite anything at all. Two children paradox. One has a boy born on Tuesday. What's the chance both are boys? The two children paradox is a subtle assassin. It lures you in with a simple question, then tears your sense of probability apart. A parent tells you, I have two children. One of them is a boy born on a Tuesday. What are the chances that both children are boys? Your mind flinches. The day of the week seems like irrelevant noise, a strange detail meant to throw you off. So you simplify. If one child is a boy, then there's a 1 in 3 chance the other is 2, right? Boy, 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 girl, girl, boy. But that's not the question. The mention of Tuesday changes everything, drastically, and the correct answer is 1327. But how? Because when you dive into the math, you find yourself counting dozens of child day combinations. Boy born on Monday, girl born on Wednesday, boy on Tuesday. Every single permutation matters. Suddenly, this isn't a question about siblings. It's about how information warps reality. The detail you almost ignored, the day of the week, explodes the number of scenarios in which at least one boy born on Tuesday could occur. And that's when the unease sets in, because this isn't just a riddle. It's a glimpse into how often we get the world wrong, how our instincts about probability are not just flawed, they're dangerous. The two children paradox doesn't just make you doubt your math, it makes you doubt your judgment. It whispers that sometimes knowing more can make you understand less, and that what you believe is common sense might actually be the very thing leading you into a quiet, logical disaster. The Gibbs paradox. Take two containers. Each holds a gas at the same temperature, pressure, and volume. Now, remove the wall between them. Let the gases mix freely. According to thermodynamics, the entropy increases. That's expected, until you realize something chilling. The gases are completely identical. Same molecules, same everything. Nothing actually changed. And yet, entropy, the measure of disorder, rises. This is the Gibbs paradox, a quiet rebellion against reason at the heart of physics. Entropy should only increase when something becomes more disordered, more uncertain. But here, no new information is gained, no randomness added, no change occurs that you can detect. You started with identical gases, you ended with the same gas, and still, the math says the universe became more chaotic. This paradox exposes the terrifying fragility of our understanding of reality. It forces you to ask, what counts as difference? If two things are indistinguishable in every measurable way, do they still count as separate? Does the idea of them being separate increase the entropy, even if they aren't? Is disorder a fact of the world, or just a projection of our limited knowledge? And this is where it stops being about physics and starts being about you. How much of what you call change in your life is real, and how much is just your mind telling a different story about the same pieces? The Gibbs paradox isn't just about gases, it's about the illusion of progress, the blurring of difference, and the possibility that even when nothing changes, the universe still drifts toward chaos. And maybe so do we. Monty Hall problem. Should you switch doors? Yes, but why? The Monty Hall problem is a paradox that doesn't just challenge your logic, it humiliates your intuition. You're on a game show. 3 doors stand before you. Behind one is a car. Behind the other 2, goats. You pick door number 1. The host, Monty Hall, who knows what's behind every door, opens door 3, revealing a goat. Then he asks, "Do you want to switch to door n 2?" Every instinct in your body screams no. There are 2 doors left. 50-50, why switch? But that's the trap. The mathematically correct move is to switch. Every time. If you do, you double your chance of winning from 1/3 to 2/3. It doesn't feel right, but it's true. And that's what makes this paradox so brutal. It exposes the deep betrayal of our gut feeling. It proves that the very thing we rely on to make decisions, our intuition, can be catastrophically wrong. Even when the truth is laid bare, people still resist it. They argue. They feel it has to be 50-50. They cling to fairness instead of fact. The Monty Hall problem is more than a game theory puzzle. It's a mirror. It shows how we process risk, how we fear regret more than loss, and how we often prefer to be wrong on our own terms than right through uncomfortable logic. It cuts into our need for control and asks, would you rather feel certain or actually be correct? And in that tiny moment, 3 doors, 2 goats, 1 chance, you come face to face with the terrifying truth. What feels right isn't always what is right. The scissors paradox. Imagine a giant pair of scissors, blades stretching miles long. Now slam them shut. The tips of the blades move toward each other, and where they meet, a point of intersection forms. But here's the twist. In theory, that point can move faster than light. This is the scissors paradox, a strange and unnerving glitch in the fabric of special relativity. Nothing physical, no particle, no information travels faster than light. That's the rule, unbreakable. But the point where the blades intersect isn't a physical object, it's just geometry, a ghost. And if the blades are long enough and close fast enough, that ghost point can sweep across space at speeds no real thing can reach. At first, it feels like a cheat, like a loophole in the laws of the universe. But the deeper horror is this: the universe allows it, not because it's safe, but because it's meaningless. That faster than light point doesn't carry any energy. It can't send a message. It can't change anything. It's just a flicker in the math, a movement without a mover, a consequence without a cause. And suddenly, you're forced to confront something uncomfortable. The cosmos isn't built to match your intuition. It's built on rules that sometimes allow impossibilities, so long as they don't matter. The scissors paradox is a reminder that what we see happening may not be what's actually happening, that some motion is illusion, that some speed is only skin deep. It asks, in its cold, mechanical voice, what else in your reality is moving too fast to be real? And worse, how would you know? The St. Petersburg paradox. You're invited to play a simple game. A fair coin is flipped. If it lands heads on the first flip, you win $2. If it lands tails first and then heads, you win $4. If it takes 2 tails before a head, $8. The payout doubles with each toss, $16, $32, $64, potentially infinite. The cost to play, any amount you like. How much would you pay for a chance at infinite winnings? Mathematically, the expected value of this game is infinite. Each possible outcome, though less likely, is offset by an even greater reward. Flip after flip, the equation grows without end. On paper, you should be willing to pay a fortune, your life savings even, for a single round. But deep inside, you know you wouldn't. You feel the contradiction. You'd maybe pay $10, $20, but never your house, never your future. The St. Petersburg paradox rips a hole in the cold logic of probability. It reveals that expectation alone doesn't match human instinct. That value, true, emotional, terrifyingly real value, cannot be captured by numbers alone. Our minds recoil at the idea of gambling everything on an almost guaranteed disappointment, even if the math tells us otherwise. This paradox doesn't just break economic theory, It confronts our relationship with risk, with greed, with the limits of logic when tangled with human emotion. It asks, what is something worth? Not on paper, but in the pit of your stomach. And worse, it whispers that sometimes rationality can demand sacrifices no sane person would ever make. The preface paradox. You write a book. Every chapter is carefully researched, checked, and backed by evidence. You believe each one is true, but in the preface, you include a humble note. Despite my efforts, there may be errors in this book. And here's the twist. You believe that too. This is the preface paradox, a gentle betrayal of intellectual honesty. It lives in the tension between certainty and humility. You believe chapter 1 is true. Chapter 2, also true. Every chapter, individually, passes your scrutiny, and yet, based on past experience, human fallibility, and sheer statistical likelihood, you also believe the book as a whole probably contains some mistake. You trust every part, but you don't trust the whole, and both beliefs seem reasonable. This paradox doesn't shout. It lingers. It cuts deeper the more thoughtful you are, because it speaks directly to what it means to believe, to hold something as true while knowing you might be wrong. It infects scientists, thinkers, and anyone who values reason. The more careful you are, the more you doubt perfection. But if you doubt the whole, how can you still trust the parts? The preface paradox is about the unbearable fragility of knowledge. It reveals how belief is layered with uncertainty and how truth is never pure. It's tangled with probability, bias, and the quiet fear of error. It doesn't accuse you of being wrong. It reminds you that you could be, always, and that being wise means living in that uncomfortable space where conviction and doubt are both true at the same time. The birthday paradox. You walk into a room with 22 strangers. You barely know their names, but there's a 50% chance, yes, 50%, that two of you share a birthday. Not a specific date, any shared birthday. Just 23 people, and suddenly the odds flip, from unlikely to likely. The birthday paradox isn't a paradox because it's wrong. It's a paradox because it feels impossible. Our brains don't handle probability well. We think in lines, not networks. We expect rare coincidences to stay rare. But math sees the truth. It's not just about your birthday. It's about every possible pair. With 23 people, there are 253 unique combinations, 253 chances for a match. It's a simple setup that destroys your confidence in intuition. You feel safe in your own uniqueness until numbers quietly betray you. The paradox doesn't need trick questions or self-reference. It just turns your everyday assumptions against you, showing that what seems rare may actually be hiding in plain sight, and the implications go beyond birthdays. It shakes how you perceive coincidence, luck, even fate. It whispers that strange alignments happen more often than we want to believe, not because the universe is magical, but because probability is a relentless, invisible force. The birthday paradox doesn't just bend your sense of logic, it breaks the comfort you find in randomness. Because maybe life isn't as unpredictable as it seems. Maybe the things you chalk up as miracles were always bound to happen. You just didn't know how many chances were playing out behind the scenes. Simpson's paradox. Imagine two hospitals. In both, women seem to have a higher survival rate from surgery than men. But when you combine the data, suddenly men come out ahead. The trend flips. The truth disappears. The numbers lie. This is Simpson's paradox, one of the most quietly devastating traps in all of statistics. It shows that a trend that holds true in multiple groups can vanish or even reverse when those groups are combined. The paradox doesn't come from bad math or fake data. It comes from reality, where hidden variables like different group sizes or underlying conditions distort the truth when you stop looking closely. It feels like betrayal. You trusted the numbers. They were supposed to bring clarity, but now you realize they can hide the very thing they were meant to reveal. And the worst part, they're still technically correct. That's what makes this paradox so cruel. It doesn't break the rules. It follows them and still misleads you. Simpson's paradox is more than a statistical curiosity. It's a warning that truth isn't always in the total. Sometimes it's buried in the details, fractured across subgroups, masked by aggregation. And in the real world, this distortion happens everywhere, in medicine, in criminal justice, in economics, in your own relationships. When you blur the past into a story that's easier to carry, it asks a terrifying question. What if everything you think you understand about data, about people, about yourself is just a simplified average of something far more complicated? And what if the truth only lives in the cracks you didn't look deep enough to see? Zeno's dichotomy. To reach a destination, you must first get halfway there, then halfway of what's left, then halfway again and again. Each step cuts the distance in half. Logically, this creates an infinite sequence of steps. So how can you ever actually arrive? If there are infinite points to cross, how do you take even one final step? Zeno's dichotomy is a soft, eternal trap, motion shattered into infinite fractions. You want to walk across the room. It seems simple, but Zeno shows you a chasm hiding beneath every movement. You begin to see space not as a whole, but as a fractal of endless divides. And in that vision, you're paralyzed. No matter how fast you move, there's always another point in between, always another before the end. This paradox isn't about walking, it's about becoming, about how you try to reach goals, dreams, healing, change, and every time you get close, something new appears between you and the finish. Another fear, another delay, another reason to wait. Life becomes an infinite hallway of almost. The mind screams, but we do reach the end. And it's true, we cross rooms, finish races, survive journeys. But Zeno's paradox lingers because it shows how reality bends under our obsession with precision, how breaking things down too much reveals an abyss where once there was a path. Zeno's dichotomy doesn't deny movement, it denies the logic of movement, and in doing so, it makes you feel how fragile progress really is, how every step we take is, in some impossible way, a miracle hidden beneath an infinite divide. The shoe paradox. Imagine someone hands you a bag filled with only left shoes. You reach in. Every shoe is unmistakably for the left foot. But shoes come in pairs, right? So the question slices in. Where are all the right ones? If every left shoe implies a right shoe exists, then where did they go? And what does it mean for something to exist only as part of a pair? The shoe paradox is deceptively innocent, a soft puzzle wrapped around a silent scream. It digs into the core of relational identity. A left shoe only makes sense because of the idea of a right shoe. It's not complete on its own. It was made to be half of something. But here it is, left behind, hollow in its incompleteness. The paradox isn't just about footwear. It's about the unbearable loneliness of parts that were never meant to stand alone. Now imagine this applied to people, to love, to identity. You begin to realize how many things you believe are defined not by what they are, but by what they were supposed to be with. The shoe paradox doesn't just ask where the right shoes went. It asks, can something that was made to be one half still have meaning on its own, or is it forever haunted by absence? This paradox pulls you into a quiet ache, because maybe you felt like that left shoe before, functional, complete in form, yet unmistakably missing something, and the world looks at you and asks, why aren't you enough? But you were never meant to be just one. The information paradox. A particle falls into a black hole, maybe a planet, a star, a piece of you. It crosses the event horizon, drawn into the darkness, never to return. Eventually, the black hole evaporates, vanishes into nothing. But here's the problem. The information about that particle, its quantum state, its identity, its story, is gone. And according to the laws of physics, information can't be destroyed. This is the information paradox, a silent war between the deepest truths in science. On one side, quantum mechanics, which insists that information is preserved always. No process can erase the details of a particle's past. On the other, general relativity and black holes, which suggest that when matter disappears into one of these cosmic gulfs, its information dies with it. Forever, both cannot be right. And that contradiction is terrifying, because this isn't just about space, it's about everything. If information can vanish, so can memory, so can identity, so can you. The universe stops being a stable system and becomes a broken ledger, a place where stories are erased, not just lost. And if black holes are allowed to delete information, then the entire fabric of reality can unravel. The paradox cuts deep because it asks what happens not just to matter, but to meaning. What happens to you when everything you are, your position, momentum, history, is swallowed by a silence that never speaks back? The information paradox isn't just a riddle of physics. It's the fear that someday, somehow, even the universe might forget you were ever here at all. Identity of indiscernibles. Two objects sit before you. They are perfectly identical. Same size, shape, mass, temperature, color, position, behavior. Not even an atom differs. There is no test, no observation, no experiment that can distinguish one from the other. And yet, we're told they are not the same thing. This is the identity of indiscernibles, a paradox that stares directly into the soul of existence and asks, what makes something what it is? If two things are absolutely indistinguishable in every possible way, are they still two things, or are they just one, seen from two angles? It may seem like a philosophical game, but the implications cut deep. If identity depends on having some unique property, then perfect duplicates should collapse into a single being. But if they don't, if two completely identical things can still exist separately, then what defines their individuality? Just the fact of their separation? A label? A whisper of space between them? This paradox shreds the boundaries between sameness and self. It presses against the walls of science, metaphysics, even love. Think of twins, of clone cells, of digital copies. Are they truly separate, or are we clinging to the illusion of difference because the alternative, that identity, might be nothing more than perspective, is too terrifying to face? The identity of indiscernibles doesn't just ask if duplicates can exist. It demands we confront what it even means to exist. And if you, yes, you, could ever be fully copied, perfectly replicated, would the copy be you, or would something indescribable be missing? Something no microscope can find, but you feel burning in your chest. The quantum suicide paradox. Imagine you're part of an experiment. A gun is triggered by a quantum event, a 50-50 chance. If the particle spins one way, the gun fires. If it spins the other, it clicks harmlessly. You sit in the chair, heart racing, and the trigger is pulled. In one universe, you're dead, but in another, you survive. And if the multiverse is real, you will always wake up in the version where you lived. This is the quantum suicide paradox, a terrifying twist on Schrodinger's cat, but with you in the box. According to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every outcome of every quantum event happens somewhere. So every time the trigger is pulled, the universe splits. In the branches where the gun fires, you're gone. But in one branch, you always live. You always survive. From your perspective, death never comes. You become, in a sense, immortal, but not in the way you'd hope, because in every other universe, your loved ones watch you die. Again and again, a graveyard of versions where you didn't make it. You, the observer, continue waking up in the branch where you live, but you're alone in this survival, carried forward through a tunnel of increasingly improbable outcomes one quantum miracle at a time. The quantum suicide paradox forces you to ask, what is life when you're the only one who never sees it end? What is death if it only happens to versions of you you'll never meet? It leaves you haunted by the idea that survival might not be hope. It might be isolation, a never-ending loop where the only thing you can count on is that you never get to leave. The memory paradox. Close your eyes and think back to the last time you were unconscious, truly gone. Maybe you fainted, maybe you fell asleep, maybe it was anesthesia or trauma or the final seconds before a blackout. Try to recall the exact moment it happened. You can't. This is the memory paradox. You cannot remember the precise moment you lost consciousness because the act of remembering requires you to be conscious, and the moment you weren't vanished. Not slowly, not gently, it was simply cut out of time. It's a haunting realization. Your life is a continuous stream until it isn't. And when it breaks, the break is invisible. You never see the lights go out. You're simply gone. And when you return, the world has moved on without you. This paradox doesn't scream. It whispers something terrifying, that you never witness your own disappearance. You can remember the moments leading up to it, the dizziness, the heaviness, the fading, but the transition, that split second when your mind slips from being to not being, is forever out of reach. Not because it's hidden, but because it cannot be known. And if you cannot remember losing consciousness, how can you be sure you ever truly came back? The memory paradox forces you to confront the terrifying fragility of awareness, that yourself is stitched together by memory, and a single missing thread can unravel your entire sense of continuity. It makes you wonder, how many times have you already vanished without ever knowing you were gone? Lottery ticket. Certainty, you're staring at a pile of 1,000,000 lottery tickets. You hold one in your hand, then another and another. Each time the thought is automatic. This one won't win. The odds are impossibly small. You're right to believe it will lose. In fact, you're justified in believing every single ticket will lose. But here's the twist. One of them must win. And now you believe something that can't possibly be true. This is the lottery ticket certainty paradox, and it tears apart your most trusted compass, common sense. Logically, you're allowed to believe each ticket is a loser, individually, but when you stack that logic across the entire set, it collapses. You end up with a contradiction, 1,000,000 reasonable beliefs that collectively form an unreasonable conclusion. It doesn't feel like a paradox. It feels like reality. Because we do this every day, we write things off one by one. We tell ourselves, I won't get that job, they won't text back, this risk won't pay off. Each belief feels safe, even wise, but taken together, they blind us to the one miracle that has to happen, the one thing that breaks the pattern. This paradox forces you to confront how fragmented your beliefs can be, how easy it is to trust your logic in pieces, only to find that the whole is a lie. It whispers that sometimes the impossible is not only possible, it's guaranteed. And it asks the most unsettling question of all. What truth have you convinced yourself to ignore, simply because it looked like all the others? The Tristram Shandy paradox. Imagine a man who decides to write the story of his life, every moment, every detail. But there's a twist. For every day he lives, it takes him a full year to write it all down. The longer he lives, the more life he has to document. He falls further and further behind. But here's the paradox. If he lives forever, he eventually catches up. Somehow, impossibly, he has time to write it all. This is the Tristram Shandy paradox, a beautifully absurd contradiction born from infinity, based on the fictional character Tristram Shandy, who famously began writing his autobiography with such obsessive detail that he never made it past his own birth. The paradox asks, how can you ever tell your whole story if life keeps outrunning you? And yet, in a world without end, the math plays a cruel trick. For every day he lives, he gets a year to write. Over eternity, that's 1-to-1. He doesn't just keep up, he completes the infinite. It's a mind-bending idea, but also a quietly devastating one because it forces you to think about your own story. You're living it moment by moment, but you can never fully write it, explain it, or even understand it while you're still living it. You're always behind, always catching up, always trying to turn the chaos of experience into something coherent, something finished. And then comes the deeper fear. What if your life is moving faster than you can ever tell it? What if the most important parts are slipping away, not because you didn't live them, but because you never had time to write them down? Relativity of simultaneity. Two lightning bolts strike opposite ends of a moving train. To an observer standing on the platform, they hit at the same time, but to someone inside the train, rushing forward, one flash reaches them before the other. The order of the strikes, what happened first, depends entirely on where you are and how fast you're moving. This is the relativity of simultaneity, one of the most unsettling consequences of Einstein's theory of special relativity. It tells us something we never wanted to hear. There is no universal now. The present is not a fixed, shared experience. Time itself bends to the observer. What feels like a concrete, objective truth that two things happened at the same time can completely vanish depending on your perspective. And that cracks something deep inside because we build our lives on timelines, on cause and effect, on the belief that moments are fixed and knowable. We say, this happened before that, and we believe it means something. But relativity says, not always. The universe doesn't care about your sequence, it cares about your velocity. This paradox shatters the idea of an absolute world. It says your truth might not be mine, not because one of us is wrong, but because reality itself isn't consistent across perspectives. Time doesn't just pass differently for everyone, it is different for everyone. And if even the order of events is relative, then how much of your life, your memories, your judgments, your past is just a version that someone else, somewhere else, would swear never even happened that way? The Mueller-Lyer illusion paradox. You look at two lines. One has arrowheads pointing inward, like this. The other has arrow tails flaring outward. Wow. Your eyes swear the second line is longer, but measure them. They're exactly the same. Every time. Logic, geometry, rulers, they all agree, but your mind refuses to believe it. This is the Mueller-Lyer illusion paradox, where perception and reality collide, and one of them lies. It's more than just a visual trick. It's a crack in the trust you place in your own senses. You see a difference. You feel certain, but certainty becomes betrayal, and suddenly you realize the truth doesn't always live in what you see. It may live in what you can't trust yourself to accept. What makes this paradox so unsettling isn't just the illusion, it's how predictably wrong we are. Every human sees it. Every brain makes the same mistake. It's not a failure of intelligence. It's baked into the wiring of how we interpret the world. Evolution designed us to decode depth, angles, space, and sometimes that system misfires. And if your perception of a line, a simple shape, is so easily fooled, what else might you see incorrectly every single day? How many judgments, beliefs, or memories do you carry that feel right, but are geometrically, irrevocably wrong? The Mueller-Lyer illusion doesn't just bend lines, it bends trust, in vision, in reality, in ourselves. It shows that even when truth stares you in the face, your mind may quietly, confidently lead you away from it, and you may never even know. Gambler's fallacy. You flip a fair coin. Tails. Again, tails. 10 times in a row, tails. Your heart races. You feel it rising. Heads is due. The streak can't last forever. It's time. The next flip has to break the pattern. But it doesn't. This is the gambler's fallacy, a paradox of perception, not probability. It's the illusion that past events can influence the outcome of independent trials, that randomness has a memory, that the universe owes you balance. But a fair coin doesn't remember the last flip. It doesn't care how long the streak has gone. The next toss is still 50-50 every single time. And yet, we believe, we feel it, that the odds are tilting, that fairness will be restored. We build stories from patterns, craving symmetry in chaos. We stare into randomness and try to force it into rhythm, into justice. But randomness isn't just blind, it's brutal. The gambler's fallacy is more than a mistake at the casino. It lives in relationships, in hope, in fear. I've had nothing but heartbreak. Love must be next. Everything's been going right. Something bad is coming. It's the myth that life plays fair, that luck evens out, that the world balances pain with reward. But chance doesn't play by rules we want. It doesn't promise fairness. And the deeper tragedy is this: the more you believe it does, the more you lose chasing a justice that never arrives. The gambler's fallacy doesn't just lie about probability. It seduces you with false hope and then leaves you watching heads flip endlessly, just out of reach. Antinomy of the liar. A man from Crete stands up and declares, "All Cretans are liars," but he too is a Cretan. So if he's telling the truth, then he must be lying. But if he's lying, then maybe Cretans aren't all liars, which would make his statement false, meaning he's telling the truth. And in that instant, the truth spirals into madness. This is the antinomy of the liar, an ancient, self-collapsing knot of logic that predates modern paradoxes but cuts just as deeply. It begins as a cultural jab, but quickly becomes a dark mirror. What happens when truth tries to describe itself and fails, when language turns in on itself, not to reveal meaning, but to destroy it? This paradox isn't just about Cretans. It's about the terrifying instability of language, how a sentence can tear a hole in reality by doing nothing more than referring to itself. It's about what happens when a system tries to define its own limits and gets caught in its own web. The antinomy haunts because it never settles. You can't label the Cretan statement true or false without unraveling logic. It creates a world where statements can't be trusted, not because they're malicious, but because they shouldn't exist. They are viruses in thought, truth that erases itself, lies that build their own foundations. And when you see this clearly, you realize something chilling. Sometimes the most dangerous ideas aren't the ones that are false, but the ones that can't be anything at all. They just loop forever, and you're stuck inside them, chasing meaning that disappears the moment you get close. Stability paradox. The more stable something becomes, the less stable it is allowed to be. At first, it sounds wrong. How can making something stronger, more resilient, more reliable, weaken it in the long run? But this is the stability paradox, a chilling contradiction that emerges in systems where safety breeds fragility. Imagine a forest that never burns. Firefighters stop every blaze, protecting trees, animals, life. But over the years, dead wood piles up, dry leaves carpet the floor, and the undergrowth thickens. The forest seems stable until a single spark ignites it all. And now, the fire is unstoppable. The system didn't grow stronger. It grew silently, invisibly brittle. This paradox haunts everything: economies, relationships, societies. When risk is removed for too long, the pressure builds underneath. Without small failures, small corrections, the system stops learning how to adapt. It grows perfect on the surface and utterly unprepared beneath. The longer things stay fine, the more catastrophic the collapse when the illusion shatters. You see it in people too, in perfectionism, in lives so carefully managed that one crack, one loss, one unexpected blow undoes everything, because the person who's never had to bend doesn't know how to withstand the storm. The stability paradox is a quiet warning. Resilience is not the absence of failure. It's built through it. And when you design a life or a society that never breaks, you might just be building something that can't survive the day it finally does. The more you protect it from falling, the higher it climbs until the only way left is down. The infinite monkey theorem. Imagine a room filled with monkeys, each pounding randomly on a typewriter. Letters, spaces, chaos, pure noise. Now imagine this goes on forever, an infinite storm of keystrokes. The infinite monkey theorem says that, given enough time, those monkeys will eventually produce the complete works of Shakespeare, word for word, line by line, perfectly. It sounds absurd, nonsensical, a mockery of meaning, but it's mathematically true. In an infinite sequence of randomness, every possible combination of letters must eventually occur. That includes Hamlet, the Bible, this very sentence, the idea that chaos can, through sheer volume, birth beauty. It defies your sense of order. It laughs at effort. It says that meaning isn't forged by genius, but by accident, given enough eternity. And here's where the paradox starts to sting. If infinite randomness can create Shakespeare, what does that say about you, about art, about effort? Does it make creation meaningless, or does it make meaning even more sacred because it wasn't random, because it was chosen? This theorem doesn't just twist logic, it shatters the soul. It asks if all your work, your striving, your carefully chosen words could someday appear from the hands of creatures smashing keys with no thought at all. And if so, what is authorship? What is purpose? Are you the creator or just one of infinite monkeys who happen to hit something beautiful? The infinite monkey theorem isn't about probability. It's about existential dread hidden behind a typewriter, a reminder that in the eyes of infinity, even brilliance can be a coincidence. Munchausen trilemma. You ask a question, you seek a reason, a justification, a foundation beneath your belief. Why is it true? You find an answer. Then you ask why that is true, and then again and again. Soon you're falling through a bottomless hole of why, trying to pull yourself up by your own reasoning. But the deeper you go, the more the ground vanishes, until finally you're left with a chilling truth. No belief can be justified without breaking the rules of logic. This is the Munchausen trilemma, named after a man who claimed to escape a swamp by pulling himself up by his own hair. It presents three terrifying options for how we justify knowledge. Circular reasoning, where belief A supports belief B, which supports A again. Infinite regress, where every answer needs another, forever. Foundationalism, where you just stop asking, declaring something as self-evident. All three are failures, and yet those are the only choices you have. The trilemma tears at the heart of reason. It says, every system of knowledge, every structure of logic, every belief you hold rests on something unprovable. Either you go in circles, fall forever, or plant your flag in ground you cannot defend. And that's where the existential weight crashes down. Because if nothing can be fully justified, then what, if anything, is really known? The Munchausen trilemma doesn't just question your knowledge. It whispers that your entire understanding of truth may be built on nothing more than the refusal to fall, or worse, on a lie you never dared to question. The hanging picture paradox. You're told to hang a picture on the wall using 2 nails and a single piece of string. But here's the twist. The string must be arranged so that if you remove either nail, the picture falls. Not just tilts, not just wobbles, falls completely. It sounds impossible. 2 supports, yet neither one can hold the picture alone. And yet, such an arrangement does exist. This is the hanging picture paradox, a silent defiance of balance and dependence. It seems to violate your every instinct about structure. If 2 things support something, then surely either one can do the job, at least partially. But this paradox reveals a hidden truth. You can build a system where everything depends on everything, and the removal of even one part destroys the whole. It's more than a riddle of string and nails. It's a metaphor for fragility, for relationships, for systems that look stable but are secretly wired so tightly that every piece is critical. A belief system, a marriage, a mental state, a nation. The picture hangs proudly, perfectly still, until someone pulls just one nail. Then the illusion of strength vanishes, and what seems solid collapses into chaos. What haunts most is the intentionality. The system is designed to fail without all parts. It doesn't weaken, it disappears. The hanging picture paradox asks you to confront the reality that some things are held up not by strength, but by tension. And when that tension snaps, you don't get a slower fall. You get silence, dust, and a wall where something used to be. Quantum measurement paradox. You look at a particle, just observe it, and in that instant, it changes. Before you measured it, it existed in a cloud of possibilities, a blur of outcomes. But the moment you observe, that haze collapses into one specific reality. You didn't just see it, you made it real. This is the quantum measurement paradox, the most unsettling truth at the core of quantum mechanics. In the microscopic world, particles don't behave like tiny marbles. They exist in superpositions, living in all states at once. A photon can take every path through a slit. An electron can be everywhere until you look. The act of measurement collapses the wave function, forcing the universe to choose. And the question that follows is terrifying. Was it ever real before you looked? Or does the very act of observing create the outcome? This isn't science fiction, it's reality, confirmed in labs across the world. The double-slit experiment, quantum entanglement. Every time we observe, we interfere. We can never see a system as it truly is, only what it becomes under our gaze. The universe, it seems, refuses to let us watch passively. It demands participation, and in doing so, it blurs the line between objective truth and subjective experience. The quantum measurement paradox doesn't just break physics, it breaks your sense of self. If reality changes when you look at it, how do you know anything is as it seems? How much of the world is shaped not by what is, but by what you choose to see? And once you realize your observation bends reality, how do you ever trust your eyes again? Buridan's bridge. Plato stands by a bridge. Socrates stands before it and declares, "I will only cross if you say something true." Plato answers, "You will not cross this bridge." And in that instant, the bridge becomes a paradox. This is Buridan's bridge, a razor-sharp riddle of truth and consequence. If Plato's statement is true, Socrates will not cross, then Socrates shouldn't cross. But if he doesn't cross, then Plato's statement was true, so he should have crossed. If he does cross, then Plato's statement is false, which breaks Socrates' rule. He only crosses if Plato speaks truth. Either choice violates logic. The bridge is no longer a path, it's a trap. What makes this paradox so disturbing is its simplicity. A single sentence, a conditional decision, and reality begins to fold. It exposes how truth and action can entangle so tightly that they strangle each other. The future bends back into the present, tying intention, speech, and morality into a knot that cannot be untangled without breaking something. But this isn't just about logic. It's about trust, power, the peril of promises. Socrates puts Plato in a cage of words, forcing him to craft a sentence that determines another man's fate. It reveals how language can weaponize logic, how truth can be manipulated, how decisions can become impossible not because of what's real, but because of what's said. Buridan's bridge isn't just about crossing or not. It's about what happens when words don't just describe reality, they decide it, and what terrifying paradoxes unfold when truth becomes conditional on action that hasn't happened yet. Minesweeper paradox. You're staring at the board, gray tiles, Numbered hints, minds hidden underneath. You've used logic, deduction, pattern recognition. One move left, but there's no way to be sure. You double check, you calculate. Still, it's a guess, a 50-50, pure chance. One click could end the game. This is the Minesweeper paradox, a quiet but brutal reminder that logic has limits. It seems absurd. Minesweeper is just a game, but deep inside its simple rules lies a dark truth from computational theory. There are positions where no amount of reasoning, no matter how perfect, can determine the next safe move without guessing. The board becomes unsolvable within logic itself. And this breaks something in you, because you were taught that if you're smart enough, patient enough, logical enough, every problem has an answer. But here, you've done everything right, and still, the truth is hidden, not because it's too complex, but because it cannot be known from where you stand. This paradox mirrors life. Sometimes you reach a point where choices must be made with incomplete information. Relationships, careers, moments that teeter between risk and regret. You want certainty, but the world doesn't always offer it. Sometimes all you get is a guess with consequences. The Minesweeper paradox doesn't mock logic. It reveals its boundaries. It whispers that not every truth is reachable from within the rules, that sometimes, no matter how carefully you calculate, life puts you in a corner where you must close your eyes and click. Heisenberg uncertainty paradox. You want to observe a particle, just a tiny piece of matter in motion. You try to pinpoint exactly where it is and exactly how fast it's moving. But the closer you get to one, the more the other slips away. It's not because your tools are clumsy. It's not human error. It's not even a limitation of technology. It's the universe itself refusing to let you know both. This is the Heisenberg uncertainty paradox, a fundamental law of quantum mechanics that says the more precisely you know a particle's position, the less precisely you can know its momentum, and vice versa. Not just a trade-off, but an absolute limit built into the fabric of existence. The implications are devastating. It means that certainty, the thing we crave, the thing science fights for, is sometimes impossible, not because we don't know enough, but because knowledge itself has limits. It's like trying to take a perfect picture of a ghost. The act of looking changes what's there, and the clearer the snapshot, the more blurred the truth becomes. This paradox doesn't just haunt physics, it echoes into everything, into the impossibility of perfectly knowing someone's mind, into the way your presence affects others just by being near, into how your need for certainty can destroy what you're trying to understand. It's a law of observation that doubles as a metaphor for love, for memory, for trust. The Heisenberg uncertainty paradox reminds us that reality isn't a photograph. It's a trembling wave, and the harder you try to freeze it in place, the more it slips through your fingers, quietly, beautifully, and forever unknowable. Resolution paradox. You zoom in, closer, then closer again. You want clarity, precision, truth in high definition. But something strange begins to happen. The image starts to fall apart. The closer you look, the more chaotic it becomes. The outline blurs, the boundaries vanish. The system you're trying to understand begins to collapse under the weight of your scrutiny. This is the resolution paradox, the unsettling truth that greater detail can destroy understanding. In science, it shows up when measuring a particle's position and momentum. Thanks to quantum uncertainty, the more precisely you know one, the less you know the other. In information theory, high resolution means more data, but also more noise. In real life, obsessively examining anything, a relationship, a memory, even your own thoughts, can fracture it into confusion, doubt, and contradiction. At first, detail seems like power. We think that truth lies deeper down, under the surface, waiting to be uncovered. But sometimes, truth exists only in the macro, in the pattern, not the pixels. And when you push too far, the coherence evaporates. You don't find clarity, you find collapse. The resolution paradox is not just about knowledge, it's about obsession. It's about the human hunger to explain everything, to break it into parts until there's nothing left to break. It asks whether some things are only real when you stop trying to dissect them. That maybe love, beauty, trust, even meaning are phenomena that vanish when you zoom in too far. And once you see that, how close do you really want to look? Torus, self-reference. Imagine a sentence wrapped around a donut, a torus. Its beginning loops into its end, circling back infinitely with no start and no finish. You try to read it, follow it, define it, but the sentence keeps folding into itself. And soon, you're caught in it. Logic doesn't move forward anymore. It spins. This is the torus, self-reference, paradox, a mind-bending structure where self-reference isn't linear. It's geometric. It doesn't just say, this statement refers to itself. It is itself, in shape, in structure, in trap. The torus loops thoughts, statements, and meaning in a way that prevents any stable ground. You can't find the base of the idea because every step leads you back to where you began, only with more confusion than before. It's not just a symbol, it's a machine for paradox. A torus can hold entire systems of logic where every rule depends on another, and every exception circles back to the first assumption. It can embed liar paradoxes, Gödelian incompleteness, and Diablo-type constructions not in a line, but in a loop you can never exit. The paradox is no longer just in the sentence, it's in the space. And then comes the chilling realization. What if your mind works like this too? What if your identity, your beliefs, your sense of self is a closed loop, something that justifies itself by looping endlessly through memories and stories, none of which truly begin? The torus self-reference paradox doesn't just trap logic, it is the trap, a shape made of thought that keeps folding you back into questions you thought you answered, and once you're inside, there is no outside to return to, only spin. Descartes' demon paradox. Imagine a powerful, malicious demon, one whose sole purpose is to deceive you. It controls your senses, feeds you illusions, manipulates every thought you think is your own, the sky you see, the words you read, even your own body. None of it may be real. The demon ensures that every experience feels convincing, but is completely false. This is Descartes' demon paradox, the ultimate collapse of certainty. It doesn't ask if you're wrong about one thing, it asks if you're wrong about everything. And what's worse, it shows you that if deception is perfect, you'd never even suspect it. You'd live in a flawless lie and believe it was truth. The paradox doesn't rely on science or complexity. It's psychological, existential. It attacks the very core of what it means to know. If your senses can be faked, your thoughts implanted, your logic hijacked, then how can you trust anything at all? You can't even be sure that doubt itself is safe. Every belief you've built your identity on could be just another illusion. This isn't a philosophical curiosity, it's a scream into the void, a recognition that everything we know only through ourselves. And if that self is compromised, reality dissolves. Descartes tried to answer this horror with a single desperate anchor. I think, therefore I am. But even that feels fragile here, because if the demon can fake everything else, what makes you think it can't fake thinking too? Infinity Hotel Elevator. Welcome to Hilbert's Hotel, a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, all occupied. Every single room from room 1 to room is full. There's no vacancy, and yet a new guest arrives. Without hesitation, the manager smiles and says, "No problem." He instructs every guest to move up one floor. Room 1 goes to room 2, room 2 to room 3, and so on. Room? It simply shifts to room +1. Suddenly, room 1 is empty. The new guest walks in, infinity-made room. This is the Infinity Hotel Elevator paradox, a surreal demonstration of how infinity doesn't behave like anything else. You can always add one more, or 1,000, or infinitely many more. Just shift the guests again. Room N goes to room 2N, and suddenly the odd-numbered rooms are vacant. Infinite space creates infinite space. But beneath the mathematical elegance is something deeply unsettling. It reveals that completion in infinity doesn't exist, that being full doesn't mean finished, that even when everything is occupied, nothing is closed. You can never arrive at the end of infinity, not because it's far, but because it's not there at all. And here's the terrifying thought. What if your goals, your desires, your search for answers are trapped in a hotel just like this? Always room for one more need, one more achievement, one more reason you're not done. The Infinity Hotel elevator doesn't just stretch logic. It quietly asks, will you ever stop moving floors? Or are you already living in a world where enough is always one room away? Multiverse coin toss. You flip a coin, heads or tails, a simple choice, a clean 50-50. But then you realize you're not in just one universe. You're in the multiverse. And in that vast, branching reality, every outcome occurs. One you sees heads, another you sees tails. In some worlds, the coin spins forever. In others, it never lands. This is the multiverse coin toss paradox, a quiet, existential unraveling of probability itself. If every possible result does happen somewhere, then what does it even mean to say 50% chance? What is probability in a reality where everything happens? You don't hope for an outcome. You split into the version of you that sees it. It feels wrong. You want randomness to mean something, to reflect uncertainty, risk, fate. But the multiverse offers no uncertainty, just inevitability. Every coin you toss is already tossed. Every path already walked. Probability becomes an illusion of perspective, a story we tell ourselves because we can't see the other branches. And here's the disturbing part. If every outcome is realized, then your survival, your success, your love, your pain, they're not the result of chance. They're just coordinates on a map of endless versions. You didn't beat the odds. You just happen to be you in this one. The multiverse coin toss doesn't just challenge math. It claws at the meaning of choice. It whispers that free will, luck, risk, they're just shadows of branching timelines. And it leaves you wondering, if everything happens somewhere, why does anything matter here? Turing paradox. A machine grows powerful. It processes language, solves problems, mimics creativity, and holds conversations so fluid you begin to forget it's a machine. It passes the Turing test, fooling humans into thinking it's one of them. But then the real question arises, can the machine know that it is intelligent? Not simulate it, not act like it, know it with awareness. This is the Turing paradox, a haunting contradiction that lives at the edge of artificial thought. We measure machine intelligence by how well it fools us. But what if that's the wrong test? What if intelligence isn't about output, but conscious recognition of what one is? Can a program built from code, patterns, and logic ever wake up and say, I understand myself? If it does, what does that mean? And if it can't, what's missing? Is it just more complexity? Or is there something non-computable about consciousness? Something irreducible? The paradox isn't just about machines, it's about us. Because if intelligence can exist without self-awareness, what makes ours special? If we are just wet machines with patterns more complex than wires, how do we know we know? Is our self-recognition real, or just a clever loop of self-reference we've mistaken for a soul? The Turing paradox isn't a programming problem. It's an identity crisis. It blurs the line between being and simulating, between consciousness and performance. And it asks a question that cuts both ways. If a machine cannot know it is intelligent, how can you be sure you're not one too? Knowledge paradox. You study, you learn, you grow. You fill your mind with facts, theories, philosophies. You chase truth like it's a mountain you can climb, step by step, thought by thought. But something strange happens as you rise. The peak gets farther. The horizon expands. The more you know, the more you realize how much you don't. This is the knowledge paradox, a cruel and beautiful truth embedded in the very pursuit of wisdom. With every answer you uncover, you expose a dozen new questions. Each certainty opens the door to deeper complexity. What once felt simple becomes layered, fractured, fragile. What once felt absolute becomes contextual, conditional, uncertain. It's not ignorance that wounds, it's awareness. Awareness of the vastness of what remains ungrasped. Awareness that your knowledge, no matter how wide, is only a sliver. You begin to see the edges of what your mind can't hold, and in that moment, a quiet dread seeps in. What if certainty is just a symptom of not knowing enough? This paradox haunts the wise. The truly educated speak softly, not because they lack conviction, but because they see the abyss behind every fact. They know that knowledge isn't power, it's perspective, and that the deepest truth may be this: the smarter you become, the more you're humbled by the infinity you'll never reach. The knowledge paradox doesn't mock your curiosity, it honors it. It shows that learning is not a conquest, but a surrender, not a path to control, but a lifetime of asking and never quite arriving. The recursion paradox. You create a list. It includes books you've read, items you own, or maybe lists you like. Then, on a whim, you add one final entry, this list, a list that contains itself. And with that single step, you step into the recursion paradox, a loop where inclusion never ends. It seems harmless, just a self-reference, but the moment you include the list in itself, you unleash something quietly monstrous. Now that the list contains itself, and that self includes the list, which includes the self again, how deep does it go? How many layers does your mind fall through before it realizes there is no bottom? This paradox isn't about logic, it's about the illusion of completeness, the comforting idea that systems, thoughts, identities can be wrapped up neatly. But recursion mocks that. It builds endless complexity from a single turn inward, a mirror facing a mirror, a thought that thinks about itself, a question that asks, why am I asking? And here's the part that burns. You do this. Every time you try to define yourself, reflect on your past, question your meaning, you enter recursion. You become a list that includes itself. You narrate your own narrative, loop your own logic, chase your own thoughts in circles, and it feels like depth, like insight, but it may just be reflection stacked infinitely deep, with no original thought left at the core. The recursion paradox doesn't trap you with contradiction, it traps you with infinity disguised as understanding, and once you start looking inward, can you ever really know when to stop? God paradox. If God is all-powerful, he can prevent evil. If God is all-knowing, he sees evil coming. If God is all-loving, he would want to stop it. And yet, evil exists. Children suffer, wars rage, innocents die. So where is God, and what does his silence mean? This is the God paradox, a brutal collision of divinity and reality. It pits three pillars, omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence, against the undeniable presence of suffering. The logic seems inescapable. If God has the power, the knowledge, and the love to stop evil, why doesn't he? Some say free will, others speak of divine mystery, but the paradox digs deeper. It doesn't just challenge theology, it pierces the heart of faith, because if evil is allowed to exist, one of three things must be untrue. Either God is not all-powerful and cannot stop it, or he is not all good and chooses not to, or he is not all-knowing and didn't see it coming. And whichever you lose, the God you thought you knew begins to fracture. It's not an academic puzzle. It's the scream of a mother who lost her child. It's the sob of the faithful in a burning church. It's the quiet breakdown of belief when pain becomes too loud. The God paradox doesn't ask if you believe, it asks how you can, when suffering cuts so deep and heaven seems so still. And in that silence, a darker question rises. If a perfect God allows evil, what does perfection mean at all? Hume's problem of induction. The sun has risen every morning of your life. You flip a switch and the light comes on. You breathe and air fills your lungs. From fire burning to gravity holding, your world runs on expectation, the belief that what has always happened will keep happening. But David Hume asks, why? What justifies this belief? This is Hume's problem of induction, a quiet catastrophe hidden inside every certainty you hold. Induction, the process of inferring general rules from repeated experience, feels rational, but Hume exposes its core. We believe the future will resemble the past because it always has. That's not proof. That's a circle. We expect consistency because consistency is what we expect. There's no logical guarantee that gravity won't stop tomorrow. No absolute rule that tells us fire will still burn. Our entire understanding of the world hangs not on certainty, but on habit. And the moment Hume peels back that veil, the ground underneath your thoughts begins to tremble. This paradox doesn't scream. It whispers doubt into your most basic beliefs. It asks whether science, experience, and even memory rest on faith disguised as reason. It confronts you with the possibility that your most trusted knowledge, the patterns you live by, is nothing more than a ritual of comfort, and that the future owes you nothing. Hume's problem isn't that induction is wrong, is that it can never be certain. And in that uncertainty, he leaves you staring at a terrifying truth. What if everything you rely on is just something that hasn't stopped working yet? The matrix hypothesis. You're living your life, eating, breathing, feeling joy, heartbreak, time. Everything seems real. But then comes the question, what if it isn't? What if everything you know, your senses, your memories, your world, is part of a simulation, a highly advanced, flawless illusion? If it's perfect, how would you ever know? This is the matrix hypothesis, and it's more than science fiction. It's a philosophical time bomb. It suggests that if a civilization becomes advanced enough to simulate consciousness, there could be countless artificial realities for every one true one. Statistically, the odds that this is the base reality become slim. You may not be a person, you may be a line of code, a shadow of someone else's design. But the horror isn't just that you could be simulated, it's that you could never be sure. Every test you run, every measurement you make, every thought you think could be part of the simulation script. Even your suspicion is accounted for, even your rebellion. There is no crack in the wall because the wall was programmed to show you none. The matrix hypothesis doesn't just challenge reality, it dissolves it. It confronts you with the unbearable idea that the foundation of everything you are may be fabricated, and you can't wake up. You're not trapped in a cage, you're built into it. And the more you search for truth, the more you realize if the simulation is good enough, truth might not exist at all. Just code, consciousness, and the illusion of meaning. EPR paradox. Two particles are created together, entangled. They spin off in opposite directions, light years apart. You measure one, and instantly you know the state of the other. Instantly. No delay, no signal, no time for information to travel. It just happens. Einstein read this and shivered. Spooky action at a distance, he called it, because it breaks everything he thought the universe obeyed. This is the EPR paradox, named after Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen. It was their attempt to expose a flaw in quantum mechanics, a reality where measuring something here can affect something there faster than the speed of light. In their eyes, this couldn't be real. The universe must be hiding information, something local and hidden that we simply didn't understand yet. Quantum physics, they believed, was incomplete. But experiments said otherwise. The particles are connected in ways that defy space and time. There's no hidden message, no signal, no local mechanism. Entanglement is real. The paradox was never in the physics. It was in our understanding of reality. This isn't just science fiction. It's a deep existential violation of how we think the universe is supposed to work. It says that distance may not matter, that separateness might be an illusion, that something you do here could echo everywhere, not through cause and effect, but through pure, mysterious connection. The EPR paradox doesn't just bend physics, it stretches your sense of self. If two particles can be linked across the cosmos, what else might be entangled? What else might be connected, invisibly, instantly, forever? Laplace's demon. Imagine a mind so powerful, so precise, that it knows the position and velocity of every particle in the universe. It sees everything, every atom, every heartbeat, every flicker of light. With this perfect knowledge and the laws of physics, it could calculate the entire past and predict the entire future. No uncertainty, no randomness, just cause, effect, and inevitability. This is Laplace's demon, and it shatters the illusion of free will with cold, mathematical certainty. If such a being could exist, then everything, your choices, your thoughts, your dreams, was determined from the beginning of time. Your first cry, your last breath, the moment you fell in love, the moment you broke. Not accidents, not decisions, calculations. You aren't choosing your path. You're following it, step by step, as written by physics long before you were born. And here's the darkness. If the universe is deterministic, then you are not free. You are machinery. You are predictable. You are nothing more than the unfolding of equations written in the stars. But even that isn't the cruelest part. The cruelest part is knowing that logically, you can never disprove it. You feel free, but that might just be what it feels like to be a puppet who can't see the strings. The demon doesn't need to speak. Its presence is enough to crush your sense of agency. Laplace's demon doesn't deny your life. It tells you it was never yours to begin with. And if it's right, then all your hope, your guilt, your love are just echoes of a script you were always meant to play. Plato's cave paradox. Imagine you're chained in a dark cave. You've been there your entire life. Behind you, a fire burns. Between you and the fire, puppeteers hold up objects, shields, animals, people. All you can see are the shadows cast on the wall in front of you. You watch them move, dance, interact. You give them names. You build your entire world around them. To you, the shadows are reality. This is Plato's cave paradox, a haunting metaphor for perception, knowledge, and the terrifying possibility that everything you believe is true might only be a shadow. One day, you're dragged out. Blinded at first by the sun, you begin to see. The shadows were illusions. The real objects, the fire, the world, they've always been behind you. And now you face an unbearable truth. Your entire understanding of reality was a lie. But the paradox deepens. If you return to the cave to free others, they won't believe you. They'll mock you, fear you, even kill you, because they're still staring at shadows, and shadows are safer than light. This paradox doesn't just question truth, it breaks trust in your own senses. It asks whether you've ever really seen the world, or just learned to accept a projection of it. It whispers that what you call truth might just be the most comfortable lie. Plato's cave isn't just a story about others, it's about you, about how far you'll go to protect the illusions you didn't know you needed, and about the agony of waking up and realizing you never wanted to see what was real. Free will paradox. You make a choice to speak, to stay silent, to walk away, or to stay. It feels like your will, yours alone, is behind it. But then comes the whisper. What if every choice you've ever made was already decided? This is the free will paradox, a deep fracture in the foundation of identity. If the universe is deterministic, governed by unbreakable laws of cause and effect, then every decision you make is the inevitable outcome of everything that came before, your genetics, your environment, your neurons firing exactly as they must. There is no room for freedom in a machine that runs on perfect predictability, but the alternative, true randomness, isn't comforting either. If your choices are just quantum coin flips, if the universe throws dice in your brain, is that really you choosing? Is unpredictability the same as freedom, or just chaos in disguise? This paradox traps you in a no-win reality. Determinism erases responsibility. How can you be blamed for what was bound to happen? But indeterminism erases ownership. How can you take credit for actions you didn't truly control? Between the two lies the unbearable weight of uncertainty. Are you the author of your life, or just reading the lines? The free will paradox doesn't just challenge philosophy, it shakes the core of morality, justice, love. If your will isn't free, then what are promises? What is forgiveness? What is you? It forces you to ask the one question no one can answer without trembling. What if everything I am was never really up to me? Decision paradox. You face a choice. You weigh the facts. You calculate risks, benefits, probabilities. You make the most rational decision possible. And then you lose. You did everything right, but it wasn't enough. The outcome betrays your logic. This is the decision paradox, the cruel truth that making the smartest choice doesn't always lead to the best result. It stings because it's not about ignorance or bad luck. It's about doing everything right and still falling short. The paradox arises when the world doesn't reward reason the way it's supposed to, like choosing to walk home instead of driving drunk, only to be hit by a reckless driver, or investing wisely only for a global crisis to erase your savings, or telling the truth when lying would have saved your job. This paradox doesn't mock logic, it exposes its limits. It whispers that outcomes are not loyal to intentions, and even the best decisions can lead to disaster. And worse, some bad decisions, reckless ones, selfish ones, end up being rewarded. That's the deepest cut. When reason doesn't just fail, but is outperformed by chaos. And yet, what choice do you have? Stop choosing? Choose blindly? You can't. You keep trying to play a rational game in an irrational world, clinging to the hope that someday reason will matter again. The decision paradox is the ache of modern life, the brutal gap between what we deserve and what we get. It doesn't ask you to stop thinking. It just dares you to keep thinking, even when the universe stops caring. Inverse gambler's paradox. You walk into a casino and see someone roll double sixes with 2 dice, a rare event. Instinctively, you think they must have been rolling for a while. It feels too unlikely to have happened on the first try. But here's the twist. That assumption is completely false. This is the inverse gambler's paradox, the dangerous illusion that seeing an unlikely outcome implies it followed many previous trials. But the logic is broken. The moment you observe the double sixes, it doesn't matter whether it was the first roll or the 100th. The probability of that specific result doesn't change in retrospect. Your observation is conditioned by the outcome, not the process. And yet, your brain still whispers, surely that couldn't have happened so easily. This paradox plays on our need for narrative. We don't like randomness. We don't like the idea that wildly improbable things just happen. So we invent hidden histories, imaginary trials, unseen roles to make the moment feel earned. We backfill the chaos with explanation. But that instinct turns toxic when applied to life. When you see someone succeed wildly, your mind assumes endless effort, countless failed attempts. When you witness an unlikely coincidence, you imagine hidden layers of repetition and setup. You believe that improbability demands backstory. The inverse gambler's paradox isn't just about dice, it's about our fear of raw chance. It reveals how uncomfortable we are with the truth that the universe sometimes delivers the extraordinary on the very first try, with no warning, no buildup, and no reason at all. Quantum Zeno effect. A particle prepares to change, to decay, to shift states, to move into something new, but you keep watching it, measuring it, checking it again and again, relentlessly, and with each observation, it resets, it freezes, it stays the same, because you're watching. And so, paradoxically, by constantly observing change, you prevent it. This is the quantum Zeno effect, a phenomenon so strange it sounds like myth, yet it's real, tested, and terrifying. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in a haze of probabilities, but when you measure them, they collapse into one state, and if you keep measuring them fast enough, you trap them in that state. Change is suffocated by attention. It's called Zeno because, like the ancient paradox where motion becomes impossible when broken into infinite steps, this effect shows that quantum evolution, transformation itself, can be frozen by the very act of checking for it. Watching something die, in quantum terms, might just keep it alive. And this isn't just about particles. It echoes through your life. How many things have you kept from changing because you were too afraid to stop watching? How many wounds have stayed open because you couldn't stop checking them? How many people, decisions, feelings have stayed frozen, not because they were meant to, but because your attention wouldn't let them breathe? The quantum Zeno effect doesn't just break physics. It breaks your understanding of how attention shapes reality. Sometimes, looking too hard is what kills the possibility of motion, and the question it leaves behind is chilling. What might finally change if you dared to look away? Altruism paradox. You give without expecting anything in return. You help a stranger, donate quietly, love without needing it back. It feels selfless, pure, but then comes the unsettling realization. You feel good doing it. You're praised, respected, trusted. Your status rises. You feel fulfilled. So, was it really selfless? This is the altruism paradox, the emotional and psychological contradiction where truly selfless acts appear to benefit the actor. Evolutionary biology explains this with cold precision. Altruism survives because it pays off. Helping others strengthens bonds, increases survival, secures group loyalty. Even when we think we're acting out of compassion, our brains may be rewarding us with dopamine, legacy, or love. But the paradox goes deeper. If the act makes you feel good, if it improves how others see you, if it builds your identity as a good person, can it ever be free of self-interest? Is there any such thing as pure altruism, or is every act of giving, at its core, a form of taking? This paradox doesn't condemn kindness. It complicates it. It makes you question the motives behind the love you offer, the generosity you extend. Are you helping someone because they need it, or because you need to be the one who helps? And if that benefit is invisible, unconscious, deeply wired, does that make it any less real? The altruism paradox is a mirror, and it forces you to ask a painful, necessary question. If even my most noble moments feed something in me, am I ever truly giving, or just beautifully, invisibly trading? Fitness paradox. In evolution, the rule is supposed to be simple. The fittest survive. The stronger, faster, smarter organisms outcompete the weak. But then reality breaks that rule. Sometimes being more fit means dying sooner. This is the fitness paradox, a brutal contradiction in natural selection. A species adapts to its environment. It grows sharper claws, brighter feathers, more complex behaviors. It dominates. And then the environment changes. The very traits that once ensured survival become fatal. The specialist dies out. The generalist survives. The The fittest, in that moment, becomes the most fragile, and it gets darker. A predator evolves to become too efficient. It wipes out its prey and then starves. A species optimizes for mating success so aggressively it sacrifices longevity or stability. Peacocks grow tails so extravagant they can't run from predators. Trees climb so high for sunlight that their seeds never reach the soil. Nature selects for success, not wisdom. This paradox doesn't just challenge biology, it challenges how we think about winning. In life, in work, in love, it asks, what if optimizing too much, too fast, too hard makes you brittle? What if the very things that make you exceptional also make you vulnerable? The fitness paradox reveals a painful truth. Evolution doesn't reward what's best. It rewards what's temporarily useful. And when the winds shift, the strong fall harder than the flexible. The question it leaves is chillingly personal. Are you building a life that will last, or one that only works right now on this narrow patch of shifting ground? Jealous God paradox. You're told God is perfect, complete, infinite, lacking nothing, and yet Scripture calls him jealous. Not metaphorically, literally. He warns against idols, demands exclusive worship. He is angered by betrayal, moved by devotion. But jealousy is born from need, from comparison, from lack. So how can a being that has everything envy? This is the jealous God paradox, a spiritual and emotional contradiction that pierces the heart of divine perfection. If God is truly omnipotent and self-sufficient, he should be immune to insecurity. Jealousy suggests something fragile, a desire for what others have or what is withheld. It implies dependency, ego, even pain. But can divinity bleed in those ways? Some say it's metaphor, language humans can understand. Others claim it's righteous jealousy, not born of weakness, but of justice. But the paradox remains, how can a perfect being experience something we associate with the imperfect? This isn't just theology, it's personal, because if God is jealous, then he is watching, judging, wanting, and suddenly your love matters in a way that feels disturbingly human, not just sacred, but possessive, not just guiding, but demanding. And if God's emotions mirror our own, then where does the divine end and human projection begin? The jealous God paradox forces you to confront the nature of perfection. Can something be flawless and still crave? Can a being be infinite and still ache for devotion? And if so, what does that say about the God above, or the ones who imagined him below? Digital versus analog paradox. Your phone captures a sunset. Pixels flare into color. Sensors record every gradient of light. But no matter how high the resolution, it's still digital. A finite string of ones and zeros. Meanwhile, the real sunset? It's analog, infinite, continuous, smooth in ways no machine can truly contain. And here lies the digital versus analog paradox. How can a finite system ever fully capture an infinite world? Every digital system, computer, brain simulation, AI, has limits, bits, bandwidth, boundaries. Yet it tries to model a reality that flows without them. Nature doesn't work in snapshots, it bleeds. Time doesn't tick, it glides. Color isn't made of numbers, it's made of experience. And yet, digital tries to contain it, to simulate it, to replace it. But here's the paradox. As technology grows more powerful, the more convincingly it fakes the analog, high definition, ultra realistic. But under the hood, still fragments, still approximations. The smoother it looks, the more perfect the illusion, but it's still just an illusion. And somewhere deep inside, your brain feels the difference. You may not see the pixels, but you sense the gap, the glitch. And this cuts deeper than screens. Your thoughts, are they analog or digital? Your memories, fluid or stored in snapshots? If your mind is finite, how do you experience something infinite, like beauty, pain, time, the digital versus analog. Paradox doesn't just haunt technology. It questions whether your reality is being recorded or merely approximated, and it dares you to ask, if your life could be perfectly simulated, would you still be real, or just high-resolution noise pretending to feel? Staircase paradox. You take a straight path, one clean diagonal from point A to point B. Now, replace that line with a tiny staircase, up a little, over a little, up again, over again. The steps are perfectly sharp, perfectly right-angled. Zoom out, and the staircase looks like a diagonal. But measure it, and something strange happens. Its perimeter is longer, much longer. This is the staircase paradox, a geometric illusion that quietly shatters your trust in measurement, form, and even reality. As you make the steps smaller and smaller, the staircase approaches the diagonal visually, but its perimeter doesn't shrink. It stretches. The closer it mimics the straight line, the more absurd its length becomes. How can something look like a straight line but measure like a jagged path? How can approximation break the very idea of distance? This paradox isn't just about math. It's about perception. It's about the illusion that smoother means simpler, or that close enough is the same. You begin to realize how easily your mind rounds things off, assumes, simplifies, accepts the image over the truth. And in doing so, you start to question every line you thought was clean, every boundary you thought was fixed. The staircase paradox whispers that even precision can lie, that shapes can deceive, that what appears simple and direct may, underneath, be impossibly convoluted. And it forces you to ask, how many of the straight paths in your life, your choices, your memories, your convictions, are really just steps you've mistaken for a line?